Good morning, everybody. We're here with the Blockchain Committee. And so just to start the day, as we begin the meeting, I want to call your attention to the committee's rules of decorum. And we don't have to walk through all of the rules of decorum. We're all familiar with the rules and the necessity for maintaining decorum, but I do want to just make absolutely clear that this is we are in the middle of a stressful season. I'm not going to deny that. However, the purpose of our meeting today is to do the work for the public, and so I would expect that all of us would respect that, and that we would maintain respect for everyone, even if we disagree, and especially as we communicate with the committee that we don't stray into some sort of antagonism or any sort of quarrel. And with that, Ms. Nord, may you call the roll?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is for the Select Committee on Blockchain for July 14th. Senator Crago, Senator Olson,
Here.
Senator Nethercott,
Excused.
Representative Filer,
Here.
Representative Wasserberger,
Excused.
Representative Yin,
He'll be here in a minute, so excused for now.
Mr. Kaufman,
No. Excused.
Mr. Pope,
Here.
Mr. Rebel,
Excused.
Co-Chairman Rothfuss,
Here.
Chairman Singh.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott is on her way, so we'll mark her as present when she arrives, as well as Representative Yen, who I know is also just running a moment late, so we'll mark him as present when he arrives.
All right, excellent. Well, it appears that we're waiting on Chris Land from the Senator's office. So in the meantime, I believe we should proceed with the review of other states' blockchain technology legislation. So, Ms. Nord, you please. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Clarissa Nord with LSO. So this morning I'll review the survey of other states' blockchain and technology-related legislation. This is Appendix 2-01 in your materials. And I wanted to note that this survey really isn't intended to be exhaustive. It just really demonstrates some trends across state legislatures this last session. This information was also compiled in March and April of this year, so the status of the bills may have changed as well. So starting with AI, this of course continues to be a really active area for other state legislatures. California, Illinois, and Virginia, they considered legislation regulating how government agencies use automated decision systems. And this is similar in concept to a bill draft that the committee will consider later today. And these bills generally focus on requiring human oversight, disclosures, and limits on relying solely on AI. And then Connecticut, they enacted a broader AI framework. And Louisiana introduced a bill addressing the use of AI in healthcare decisions. States are also looking at crypto mining and data centers. Oklahoma enacted legislation aimed at managing energy costs associated with large energy users like crypto mining operations. And then Maine considered legislation to study the broader impacts of large data center development, but that bill was vetoed, and that would have imposed a moratorium on development as well. States are also interested in enacting legal frameworks for DAOs and DUNAs, of course, following this committee's lead. Alabama enacted a framework for DUNAs, and then West Virginia also introduced a similar DUNA bill. Rhode Island and South Carolina considered legislation addressing DAOs. For data privacy and digital identity, Nebraska enacted the Agricultural Data Privacy Act, and this addresses consent, ownership rights, security standards, and disclosure limits for agricultural data. Utah enacted legislation establishing a state-endorsed digital identity program, as well as a digital identity bill of rights. And Washington enacted legislation which expands rights for digital likeness. There was also some activity involving virtual currency. Rhode Island considered a bill that would prohibit compelled disclosure of private keys. And South Dakota enacted legislation clarifying that digital currency is included within property for search and seizure purposes. In the stablecoin area, Alabama, Florida, and New York introduced bills addressing government acceptance and use of stablecoins. And this includes vendor payments, state payment programs, and the use of certain stablecoins within the bail context. And then states are also responding to consumer protection concerns involving virtual currency kiosks. This was a frequent flyer, if you will. Indiana and South Dakota enacted legislation that really aimed at preventing virtual currency kiosk fraud. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's a really brief overview of the survey, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Clarissa. We're going to be talking a little bit about what Utah's been doing. They have a lot of interesting ideas and an intention to cooperate with their neighbor here in Wyoming. And so can you talk to us a little bit about the Digital Bill of Rights, if you had any more information on that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have additional information. I was going to defer to the experts in the room. I believe Director Apollo and you have a little bit of a presentation later in the day, so I'll defer to you on that.
Sure thing. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did want to ask a couple of questions on the, let's see, on the virtual currency. Rhode Island failed their compulsory disclosure of private keys. Do you know any background on why that failed? I assume they were copying our act with their act. What was the failure there? Do you have a sense of that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a sense of that failure. I'd be happy to dig into what those actions look like for Rhode Island, but I do believe they were following Wyoming's lead on that bill.
And Mr. Chairman, Clarissa, on the virtual currency kiosks, we just passed ours. Was there anything new or different in what was done either in Indiana or South Dakota, or were they kind of following the national trend of what was going into those bills?
Mr. Chairman, one thing that I found interesting is that Indiana prohibited the use of the kiosks, which is a little bit different,
Together?
rather than just regulating the operation.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. And final question, Mr. Chairman, Clarissa, did you see anything among these that you found that stood out that were novel in areas that we haven't already been talking about, haven't seen legislation? Most of these, to me, on my general review, seem fairly consistent with other legislation we've either already passed or we've seen and discussed previously. Anything here that stands out?
Mr. Chairman, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of the legislation is consistent with what you all have discussed in the past. I didn't see anything groundbreaking by any means. I think something that's noteworthy is Alabama did become the second state to recognize DUNAs, clearly following your lead. So that's pretty significant, at least on that front.
Thank you. And on that, they effectively enacted our DUNA framework. It's my understanding that theirs was nearly identical. Is that a fair assessment?
Mr. Chairman, as far as I understand, perhaps Mr. Kaufman may have a better idea of what exactly they did on that front, but it's my understanding that they followed our lead.
All right, great, thank you. And we'll get more into the artificial intelligence discussion. It looks like several of these, the California, the Connecticut, and the Illinois, were enacted for governing automated decisions. We'll obviously be addressing that. Mr. Chairman, when we look at our automated decisions, on the healthcare decision specifically, that was Louisiana, that one failed. So we didn't see any automated healthcare decision passages this last year or previously, to my knowledge. I'm not sure if anyone has passed an automated healthcare decision bill. Are we aware of any?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any, and I believe you're correct that other states haven't enacted any legislation addressing healthcare decisions.
Excellent. All right, thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Well,
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
oh, Mr. Coffin, hello.
Yeah, good morning. Just real quickly, Mr. Chairman, something I thought worth mentioning for this discussion. As dumb luck would have it, I attended last week a National Legislative Council conference in San Diego, and the focus of the conference was on gaming. However, specifically, they're looking at prediction market legislation, and there were legislators from like 30 different states And the main focus was discussing prediction market. And so I just wanted to mention that it's not really something that this committee has looked at, but in the future might be worth looking at, seeing what other states are doing. There's a bunch of federal litigation ongoing right now in a couple of federal circuits because the CFTC has designated that much of the prediction market activity, in particular, one prediction market platform, has been deemed essentially commodity contracts, futures contracts under the CFTC, and so they're taking primacy with respect to the regulation currently. But there's active litigation about that. A number of states are challenging whether or not this is something that can be and should be regulated by states. And but just based on what I learned at this conference, a number of states are proposing legislative packages surrounding prediction markets. So, given that most prediction markets run on blockchain and crypto is the native currency for these prediction markets, again, I'm not sure that I'm recommending we do anything, but it might be a topic worth looking at.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kaufman, what were the other states looking at doing? Did you get a sense of that, or was it all across the board?
It was, yeah, Mr. Chairman, it was all across the board. I don't know that I have any specific bills to mention. There are a couple of federal groups that are pushing federal legislation as well. But most of the conversation, I would say, oriented around much of the things we did early days with respect to blockchain and crypto. Consumer protection, understanding how the platforms can and should be regulated, if they should be regulated at all. Because so many of them are decentralized finance, it's really difficult, as we all know, to get your arms around that from a regulatory standpoint. And should the states even be the right regulatory, body for that? But yeah, states were looking at everything from consumer protection to required disclosures to things that touched on privacy to all kinds of different legislative actions.
All right. Any other comments from the committee? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Clarissa, when you were looking at some of the bills about state stable coin payments, payment exception, do you know if they talked about or considered Wyoming stable coins? And I mean, maybe this is more of a question for Mr. Apollo, but if you see some of those in the future, I think it'd be worth noting whether or not they talked about Wyoming stablecoin, stable token.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I might defer to Director Apollo on that, but off the top of my head, I didn't recall if Wyoming was considered in those stablecoins.
And Ms. Nord, are you aware of any other states that are attempting anything like what we have here?
Mr. Chairman, I am not aware of that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
And that's another one to talk to Director Apollo about, because I do understand that he's had discussions with a number of states about their interest, and even up to the possibility of white labeling Wyoming stable token and issuing it on behalf of the other states. So there is a lot of opportunity and potential discussion there that we can bring up with Director Apollo.
I do agree. I do agree. All right. Is there any other discussion from the committee? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on what other states are doing? Nothing online? Okay. As far as committee directives,
Mr. Chairman, do we have Mr. Land yet? We do.
we do? Okay.
So let's go back up to the federal.
All right. I'm not seeing any committee directives, so we will go back to the original 835, which was the federal legislation update from Chris Land.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. Thank you.
Great to see everybody and great to be here with you this morning. I apologize. I was on the phone with the White House about all the fun stuff that's going to happen in the next few weeks with our digital asset market structure legislation. So, yeah, it's been a busy morning.
Thank you. I hope you sort those guys out.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's a pleasure to be here again this morning. I'll just give a brief update and stand for any questions if that sounds good, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
All right, thank you. So Sarah Lemus has been working for the last 10 months or so on her digital asset market structure legislation. The Clarity Act is kind of the successor to the one that's Gillibrand Responsible Financial Innovation Act. We've been working on a number of outstanding issues with respect to presidential ethics, developer protections in the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, stablecoin yield, law enforcement, and we've been trying to take those issues off the last few days. We're making progress on a number of those issues right now. We are, feverishly working on the requirements around presidential ethics and digital assets right now with the White House. And we are hopeful we're going to be able to share bill text, final bill text with the world this week, and potentially move to a floor vote next week or the week after and start the process to pass the Clarity Act out of the Senate. If we successfully get to 60 votes for cloture in the Senate, it'd probably be about a week or two process where we have amendments and a couple more cloture votes, and then the bill will pass the Senate. And, if we are indeed able to get this bill out of the Senate, the House will probably take it up in September and will become law in September. So this will be a huge moment for Wyoming. Braided through this entire bill is, kind of the approach Wyoming has took to digital asset regulation with respect to how we draw the line between a security and a commodity. Chairman Rothfuss will remember in 2018 the utility token bill that was ran by him and Chairman Lindholm at the time. We kind of built on that in the Clarity Act. There are a number of provisions relating to bank supervision that are going to be very helpful to Wyoming SPDIs in this legislation to enable that model to grow even further. And most importantly, it's going to bring legal certainty to the industry that needs it, and allow Wyoming's digital asset ecosystem to grow. So yeah, it's crunch time. This is we have gone from nothing and no product to kind of the main stage of the national policy debate in the United States, and we're very excited, and we have a critical few weeks ahead of us. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Land. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there anything that we should be concerned about, Mr. Land, and either from the standpoint of we should be helping and working on it, anything we can do to support, but also areas where the way Clarity is currently developing is not consistent with the work that we've been doing, or that we would or should be looking at statutory revision to accommodate that we'd want to get drafted this year?
Mr. Land?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss. No, and in effect, some of the provisions in the Clarity Act are going to turbocharge some of Wyoming's efforts. I can't say anything on the record, unfortunately, but you'll know it when you see it when the bill text comes out. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Land. And on that, if anything does arise as amendments are coming, or as you're working through the text and things go askew in some way through compromise or whatever the case may be, please reach out to us if there is anything that we need to be amending or reworking. We've obviously had a great interaction all through this process to ensure that we're coordinating, but we want to make sure that we don't end up in conflict for half a year or a year because we didn't quite get a bill drafted in time to accommodate Clarity. So yeah, please keep your eye on that, and look forward to follow-up discussions. We'll obviously be including you in our future meetings as well to ensure that we're aligned in that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss. I will say on the Genius Act with respect to stablecoin regulation, some of the rulemaking went ways that were not anticipated when the statute was passed, especially with respect to some Treasury rules. So y'all know how the rulemaking process goes. Sometimes they take a path that the legislature didn't intend. So even though the text I feel comfortable with, rulemaking can take a life of its own. So sometimes we'll have to monitor how the rulemaking goes as well.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Land. One other question, Mr. Land, anything else on the horizon, right? We've been talking about the markets bill for quite a while, and obviously we did stable tokens before that.
Yeah.
What other rumblings are going on that we should be contemplating? I'll ask that broadly, and then maybe while we've got you, focusing on AI discussions as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Rothfuss. I'll say the Federal Reserve's payment account proposal is going to be very beneficial for Wyoming. Chris Waller, one of the Board of Governor members, has proposed the skinny master account, in large part due to this committee's work on SPDIs and access to the payment system. This is, move the Federal Reserve towards a more productive angle when it comes to master account access. So towards the end of the year, the Federal Reserve is going to be finalizing its rulemaking on the skinny master account. So I would definitely keep your eye on that. It's going to be very positive for Wyoming's ecosystem. On AI, I blissfully stay ignorant on AI because I have enough crypto stuff to worry about. But we have some AI folks in our office that I think will be happy to chat with you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Land, that would be good. Maybe we can just have a little phone call later or something to see what they see on the horizon, because I think it would be important for us to know what's potentially coming down the pike.
Cool. Sounds good.
Any other questions, Mr. Chairman? All right. Anything else from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Land, for your hard work and for representing Wyoming out there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for all your hard work and for representing Wyoming well on the international stage. So let's keep up the good work. We'll see everybody later. See ya.
All right. Do we have any public comments from Mr. Land? Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and proceed to the Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Before we do that, I think, we talked about the fact that we wanted to take a moment, and I think this is an appropriate time for us to take a moment to recognize our deep sadness for the passing of our good friend and colleague, Steve Lupien. Steve Lupien has been an active, avid, incredible member of our blockchain and digital asset community for as long as any of us have been in the blockchain community. And Steve passed away regrettably on July 5th after a long struggle with brain cancer. Obviously, his partner in life, Caitlin Long, has been a good friend of ours as well, and we send our condolences to Caitlin. Steve was an incredible part of this community and has contributed so much to what we've done over the years. Steve always referred to whether it's the blockchain stampede or elsewhere, he'd talk about the OG of blockchain, and I think Steve was a seminal member of the OG of blockchain policy. There's no question about it. He was around in the beginning of the work that we did, contributed to our original blockchain task force, helped build original organizations, founding members in the state of Wyoming, and really just was instrumental to all that we've built. And then obviously through the University of Wyoming, becoming the founding member of the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation back in 2019. He helped to build the university's presence in this space from nothing up to what it is now, where they've got a minor in blockchain. They've got many students that have been contributing to blockchain work, learning about blockchain, learning about digital assets. And I think that was a big part of his life, obviously. In recent years, teaching is a passion for him. And he really enjoyed his work and valued that relationship with students at the university, building the next generation. So I just wanted to take a minute on behalf of our select committee to thank and remember Steve Lupien for all of his contributions, which were incredible on behalf of the state of Wyoming and to the state of Wyoming. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if anyone else has anything else that they'd like to add, but I think it's important that we recognize our appreciation to Steve and our condolences to Caitlin, and send our love and thoughts to them.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, and I agree. And Mr. Lupien was an educator, an innovator, and a friend, and he will be missed. And I'm thankful for all the work that he's put in and the impact that he's had here in Wyoming, and we're able to shine because of his work. He'll be missed. Do you have anybody else want to say anything? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one comment about that. I think, and it's been alluded to, but I just want to really highlight and celebrate our firm has been certainly a beneficiary of working with Mr. Lupien's students, both as legal interns, but a number of his students that have gone on to start up blockchain endeavors here in the state of Wyoming, which we've been fortunate to help with. And I've just been super impressed with Steve's ability to motivate students and get students excited about blockchain. And it's really kind of the grassroots effort, in Wyoming of building new opportunities for students to start companies, get jobs in an industry that is super fast growing and cutting edge. So I don't think that can be overstated. He's done really remarkable things.
I agree. Director Apollo.
Sure. So just quickly from my side on the topic at hand, Professor Lupien was one of really the first supporters that my company had when we moved out here to Wyoming. We moved out here in 2021 because of the very permissive legislative framework that Professor Lupien and this body worked on. The first week we were here was the 2021 Wyoming Blockchain Stampede. My team actually won the pitch competition, and Professor Lupien was one of our ardent and early supporters when we got here. And then beyond that, once I transitioned to this role with the state, reaffirming what Mr. Co-Chair and Mr. Kaufman said, he really was a big advocate for this program. His team at the Center for Blockchain Digital Innovation was always willing to help. They were early on with use case development. They were right there with us when I was running this agency solo for about a year. They were able to support us through our research on blockchain selection and much more than that. He helped us, coordinate with the Blockchain Law and Innovation Club so we could have some legal interns again as we were building out some more of the specifics about the framework that we put together. And as a fellow East Coaster transplanted to this great state of Wyoming, he will be missed.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And we'll have an opportunity, obviously, at the Blockchain Stampede in September. We'll focus some time in that effort on remembering Steve as well and celebrating him. But obviously, he's had incredible impact. And I think while he was a transplant to Wyoming, he clearly found his home here and became one heck of a cowboy, Mr. Chairman.
Indeed. Well, I think we should proceed, Mr. Chairman. Let's continue with the Wyoming Stable Token Commission update. If that's appropriate. Okay. Director Apollo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Anthony Apollo here, Executive Director with the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. We'll run through some updates for where we are with the Stable Token Commission, the issuance of the first stable token. A couple of things first. I always have a few disclaimers before we get started. First, I will note that because we have Commissioner Pope and Commissioner Revel from the commission on this body as well, I don't see Commissioner Revel on board, but I always want to flag that if there are more than 4 commissioners, if there are 4 or more commissioners of the Stable Token Commission in the select committee meeting, we have a meeting inside a meeting that we would have to notice. So not seeing any other commissioners online, I will flag that they do jump on. I will monitor that and make sure that we don't have a quorum inside of a quorum. But I always ask that perhaps one drops, but I don't think we have that issue this morning. And then secondly, I do always read disclaimers before we kick off here because we do have a token that's now in circulation. Key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by statute, the governor, or a majority vote of the commission. At this time, the Frontier stable token issued by the Commission, also referred to as the FRNT or Front token, is now available for purchase by the public on Kraken, a Wyoming domiciled cryptocurrency exchange. A link to the listing page for Front is on our website's homepage. The Front token has been deployed on mainnet, Arbitrum, Avalanche, Base, Ethereum, Hedera, Optimism, Polygon, and Solana blockchains, and smart contract addresses are published on the Commission's website. Any centralized exchange claiming to sell or distribute Front or Wyoming stable tokens besides Kraken should be considered fraudulent. Caution is advised for users looking to source Front from decentralized exchanges. Please do not attempt to purchase tokens from unauthorized sources. Information outside these public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming Legislature website at wyoleg.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. So with all that said, and to not bury the lead, but also not be too redundant here, we have, since we last spoke, launched the first Wyoming stable token. The Frontier stable token launched on January 7th. That was following a lot of internal testing, a lot of hurdles to jump over. It is a world first. To the earlier conversation, which we'll double back to about what other states are doing, I would not say anyone is particularly close to issuing a token as a state to be used in both retail and institutional contexts. A little bit more on what Nebraska and some other neighbors are doing in the following moments, but we are far and away first with everything we have going on. We did that launch in partnership with 9 different vendors, essentially counterparties that we were engaged with the firm's procurement process, the agency's procurement process, and have been building in tandem with them since. Another one of the key updates since we last spoke was the passage of Senate File 21, which was enacted into law as Senate Enrolled Act 45, Stable Token Act amendments. So these were precipitated from some of our prior conversations in the last fiscal year, last interim. Couple of updates I wanted to highlight. One is that the Stable Token Commission was granted the explicit ability to issue stable tokens on behalf of other states. If you wanted to call it a branded stable token, you wanted to call it a whitelisted stable token. Essentially, we're now using the term Wyoming stable token as an umbrella term or a banner to encompass any stable token that could be issued under our statute, the rules promulgated by the agency, policies put forth, our tech stack, our distribution. Essentially, we've created a pretty nice package that would allow us to do a turnkey deployment of a stable token for another state. It would all live on our back end. We would be responsible for the reserves, although of course we would look to do a revenue share with the other states so they could fund some of their own public goods. And at this time, I've talked to just under probably about 20 different states about what that might look like. Now, I will flag no one's at the goal line yet. I will say some states are much further ahead than others. And I will note that the level of excitement and the level of experience may not always be commensurate based on my conversations to date. To throw a few out there that are in the public forum, I've testified twice in front of New Hampshire's Stable Token Study Commission. They've got a bit more of a broader expanse. Not only is it a stable token similar to the fiat-backed, USD-backed token that we put together, they also have real-world assets considered in that mix too. But I've testified in front of them a few times and have had a number of conversations with Representative Keith Ammon, who I believe a number of members of this body have met with as well, about what it may look like to issue a stable token on behalf of the state of New Hampshire. I've also now testified in front of the Delaware Blockchain Task Force that was set up recently. And as we speak, it is Maryland Blockchain Week. Maryland just stood up their blockchain task force under Governor Wes Moore. That is a body that has been put together through several folks we've been working with in the Maryland Blockchain Association, the Blockchain Law Policy Institute out of Maryland. Those have been consolidated as independent entities to members of what is now a formal governmental body. We actually had our Chief Information Security Officer present in front of them yesterday. That's Keith Lawhorn, and our CFO, Joseph Saldana, will be in front of them on Thursday. Few others worth noting. I do believe we talked about some of these in the opening salvo here, but Florida did become the first state to pass a Genius framework, keeping in mind that Genius, while federal legislation, does have a vector by which, if you are a stablecoin issuer with a market supply under $10 billion, you could be overseen by a state framework or a state regulator. So certain states are moving to put those frameworks forward. Florida was the first to enact theirs. And I will note that as part of that enactment, that the bill that Florida passed does have a clause in there that, while not being overly specific, does compel some bodies of the government to endeavor to start doing pilot programs with stable tokens. That is all running through the Florida Office of Financial Regulation, and we have had several conversations with them. I will note another one that stood out, although it did not pass, was Idaho's FAST Act, another version of a state framework for stablecoin issuance. I will be specific, these are private stablecoin issuers in the state. While it was a framework for that, the Idaho bill also did carve out the ability for their government to essentially use sovereign issued stable tokens, stable coins, they call them. So other states are looking at what we're doing and are looking to potentially get involved with their own issuance or potentially using our own token as well. And that proof is in the pudding of that legislation that's been put forth. In terms of some of our neighbors, Nebraska has partnered up with a platform called Telcoin. They've put together legislation that looks somewhat similar to a Speedy from Wyoming plus stablecoin legislation, kind of packaged up. They're working with a blockchain and provider called Telcoin to bring that forward, although it has not launched yet. And then in North Dakota, they have been working on the Rough Rider stablecoin. I will note that North Dakota actually has a state bank that is the body that is issuing the Rough Rider stablecoin or intends to issue the Rough Rider stablecoin. Hasn't happened yet. I will be very specific that they are not doing what we are doing. They are meant to facilitate interbank transfers solely in the state of North Dakota. They are not pursuing a retail use case. They're not trying to leave the borders of that state. And in that capacity, it's quite different from what we're doing, where we're meant to be used globally for any lawful purpose, retail and institutional use cases. That was one part of the morning's conversation. There's plenty more to get through, but I want to pause there because that's already a bit of context and make sure I answer any questions about perhaps what other states are doing.
Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Apollo, I wanted to go back to the New Hampshire example you mentioned where they were looking at tokenization of real-world assets as part of the work that they're looking at. Was there anything specific, any particular use cases for real-world assets that they were looking to incorporate? I'm curious what the scope is. Director?
The chair, Mr. Co-Chair, I don't recall off the top of my head the meetings that I attended were more stablecoin specific. They are, of course, the Granite State, so that might have something to do with it. But from my perspective, I think that while that is part of their remit, I would need to go back and check to see what they've done on the real world asset side beyond just a stable coin or a stable token like what we're working on. I will also note that New Hampshire has expressed interest in, as they move forward, carving out specific use cases to perform as pilots. And perhaps some of their early legislation, which I believe will be brought forth in November of this year, will be focused on that. Can they carve out a pilot to do this one specific thing with this one specific agency and this one specific goal, rather than try to create something akin to what we've done out of the gate and then bring that forward from the ground up?
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so tokenizing Granite, got it. On North Dakota's Rough Rider, is this intended to facilitate specifically transactions between the state bank and their state chartered banks or among their state chartered banks as well? I'm curious if that's something where they see some potential use case where it's not direct interaction with the state bank, but if there is interest in having the capacity to transact among the state chartered banks without having to be working through the State Bank of North Dakota.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, that is not entirely clear at this point. My assumption is it will start as the former, where the state bank will be the one facilitating the kind of settlements. Although my understanding is eventually it should get to the point where it is settling amongst different banks in the state. I wouldn't consider it too different from what we're trying to build almost as a public utility with the Wyoming stable tokens. If those were to be used in our community banks and credit unions, there would be nothing prohibiting them from sending them amongst each other for bank-to-bank settlements. It's just not clear how that's going to evolve. And because the Rough Rider token is partnering up with Fiserv to do the issuance, I would be surprised if they weren't trying to get to the interbank position without having to clear through the kind of centralized state bank.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I just remind the committee, and some members were a part of that discussion probably 5-6 years ago. We spent a good bit of time looking at whether Wyoming should emulate North Dakota with regard to a state bank, and ran into a number of challenges as we were looking at that business model available to North Dakota doesn't appear to be available to any other state. Everyone else gets shut down. So it looks like it was a bit of a one-off, but it's a interesting application, and I really look forward to learning more about how they utilize the Rough Rider coin. Is there any discussion, Mr. Apollo, with North Dakota about white labeling Frontier for Rough Rider, or are they looking at issuing that themselves internally? Director?
So to the chair, Mr. Co-Chair, that would be their own issuance. They've partnered up with Fiserv. I do believe Circle and or Paxos may be involved with that effort. So they would be the technology providers and also facilitating, again, the relationship between the state institutions. And to me, that looks more like what I would refer to as a tokenized deposit, where essentially you're tokenizing a dollar inside the confines of a state chartered bank or a federally chartered bank, which is different in flavor than what we're working on, which is that someone can withdraw, someone could pull a Frontier stable token out of a centralized exchange or a bank into their own wallet. So for me, and again, this hasn't really emerged yet, this is still something that I think a number of different groups are working on. From my perspective, there's going to need to be connective tissue between stable coins or stable tokens like we've launched that are fully reserved and can be self-custodied versus a tokenized deposit living inside a bank. There's going to need to be some kind of bridge or transition between those two kind of states of matter, if you will. Hasn't really happened yet, whether that happens through liquidity pools where tokenized deposits are living in one side and stable coins are living on another, and people can autonomously go in and out of those, is yet to be seen. If there's a more formal pathway where your financial institution can do that for you, I think is how it will likely emerge in the immediate or near future. But we haven't seen that happen yet. I think that's still being built out from an industry perspective.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Apollo, so my assumption is, and I think this is the opportunity that I'm thinking about, is when these states start considering using stable tokens as payment solutions, they're going to basically contract that out to payment providers, right? And so it sounds like you talked to at least one of them. Are you having conversations with other payment providers to see what it would take for them to integrate Wyoming stable tokens into their set of acceptable stable tokens?
Director.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, Representative Yin, that is a large number of the conversations we're having right now. So to reiterate, this body does not sell, we do not mint and redeem the Frontier stable token or Wyoming stable tokens generally with end users, right? So Anthony Apollo as an individual cannot come to the commission, say, I want 100 Frontier tokens, here's $100, and we perform that transaction, because if we needed to do compliance and know your customer checks, anti-money laundering checks, potentially millions of end users, well, we've got a one-person compliance department, right? That's not going to scale. So what we've done is we've adopted a model similar to what Circle has with Coinbase, where there's a reseller model in place. We refer to those resellers as licensed service providers. Those are centralized exchanges. They're the payment platforms, Representative Yin, that you're talking about. They're community banks, credit unions, market makers, all different types of organizations, including NGOs and just large institutions. If they have some kind of financial remit and they have compliance checks in place on their end users, we're able to do our diligence on them, that kind of institutional body. That's know your business checks. That is where our Chief Risk Compliance Officer, Deborah Brooks, is spending the preponderance of her time right now. We collect no shortage of documents from them. We review them to make sure their financials are in order. We understand who their ultimate beneficial owners are. And then once they clear those checks on our side and they do whatever mutual due diligence they need to perform on us as a body, then we enter into a licensed service provider agreement where that governs, again, how the minting and redemption will work, potential revenue shares with those bodies, and then that would allow them to list our token on their platform for resale to end users and utilization in those payment processes that you are alluding to. Jumping a little bit ahead in my testimony here, one that I could give you as an example is Rain. Website is rain.xyz. It is a kind of a credit card or debit card analog that also runs with stable tokens on a blockchain. So you can, so our organization, the commission, will have a booth at Cheyenne Frontier Days this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so this first weekend. We will be there with the team at Rain. We will also be there with members of the Avalanche Foundation who have donated some amount of dollars to issue front tokens for the specific purpose of distributing them at Frontier Days. We'll be signing our visitors on with the Rain digital wallet. That's an application on your cell phone that will give you a blockchain wallet. You can then load it up with Frontier tokens, and because that wallet is integrated with Visa and MasterCard rails, you'll be able to just take your phone that's loaded with Frontier tokens and use tap to pay on Apple Pay or Google Pay, much like you would with your credit card. So these are the integrations that we're already moving into. These are some early ones. I can assure you we've got a number in the hoppers. It is taking some time to due diligence with a very small team, but those are exactly the conversations we are having, and that is a critical part of how we're looking to scale in the immediate future.
All right. Mr. Chairman.
So to be clear, Director Apollo, we will be having people buy beer at Frontier Days with Wyoming stable token with Frontier. Is that accurate?
Director.
Through the chair, Mr. Co-Chair, that is correct. And hopefully other things too.
Wow.
Mr. Chairman, that's a victory right there.
Yeah, innovation.
Yes.
Impressive.
Yes,
All
and I
right.
will, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, the Avalanche and the Rain app and the Avalanche blockchains are great examples of the technology that we built. The fees are functionally zero. If you use the Rain card, the Avalanche blockchain to send funds peer-to-peer, those transactions, when we run them, are typically costing 0.0000003 cents to run, as opposed to a 3 to 5% interchange fee. I believe Rain has a 1% charge on foreign exchange, but besides that, the fees are functionally nil, which would be great to see. And we're very happy to have that support early on.
All right. Anything else? All right. Please proceed, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So jumping back in the testimony, we were talking about the Stable Token Act amendments. I figured that one of the key ones we would be discussing is the ability to issue Wyoming stable tokens on behalf of other states. We will certainly keep you posted as we move forward with that, but those conversations are well underway. There are also amendments to our reserve structure. We are now able to avail ourselves of a 2A7 fund, essentially an SEC-regulated money market fund, if we wanted to go that route for our reserves. We're not there yet. It's unclear if we will get there. We're happy to have that ability. That is what Circle has with BlackRock and how they do their reporting. However, I will note and share in a few minutes that we've now gotten to a point where we have daily attestations about our reserves in place. So the value of having an SEC-regulated wrapper to give you a couple of check marks isn't certainly not invalidated, but maybe somewhat diminished by the fact that we can report on a daily basis. We'll move towards a more real-time environment. More on that shortly, but we're quite proud of, I think we're one of the first stablecoin issuers of note to have that technology built out through our partnerships with the network firm as our audit and attest partner, and also Fiduciary Trust as our custodian. A demonstration of that in a few minutes. There was also a rearrangement of the flow of funds. So as interest income starts to be derived by the underlying reserves of the Frontier stable token, rather than over collateralizing the token first, those dollars can be brought back to the agency to fulfill our obligation of repayment to the state and paying down the agency's obligations. Then we'll over collateralize. Then there'll be the return of funds on a quarterly basis, or the provision of funds on a quarterly basis to the school foundation program. So that was another key element. And then the last one I wanted to highlight is we now have the ability to take in federal grants, donations, and other contributions, which is how we've effectuated this activation at Frontier Days through a donation from the Avalanche Foundation. And it certainly enables us to work with the federal government if there are use cases that they are pursuing that would, be suited for a stable token. We'll talk more about some of the moving agency budgets onto blockchain in a few moments as well, but that's certainly something we're tracking. One more note on the amendments. We do have rules in place that are fully promulgated around reserves management and token management. The update to the statute has precipitated a review and amendments to those rules. The reserve management, token management rules, the amendments to those were approved some months ago. They just finished the 45-day public notice and comment period yesterday. So we'll have a final version of the amended rules in front of the commission at our meeting on Thursday morning. And I would expect those to move forward quite quickly. So those will be back in place and back in conformance with statute pretty rapidly. Speaking of the most recent legislative session in terms of the budget, just to give you an idea of past spend and where we're going, this agency was allocated $5.8 million for the 2025 biennium. Of those 5.8 million, we spent less than 4 million. Looking at about 3.9. We're working on the final balances, and those will be available tomorrow. But it looks like we'll have $1.5+ million of carryover into this biennium, plus interest earned on our funds, which would be about another $375,000, plus the $4 million that was appropriated to this agency through the budget bill for biennium 27. So we're looking at about $6 million in budget for the this now that we are in the 2027 biennium. So hopefully we don't need to spend all that money. The goal here is again to spend as little as we can and derive some earnings from the underlying reserves and the interest income generated thereon, and then move forward with that, and then pay down our obligation to the state, move forward with over collateralization, and then again, sweep back to the school foundation program. Final note on the budget bill from earlier this year. We were allocated 6 AWEC resources. So this team is staffed by at-will employee contractors. We are all full-time and more. So we've got a team of 5 still. We did promote Stephanie Chan from a senior business project management analyst to an enterprise program manager based on the fantastic work she's done. And we are looking to get that listing live for our 6th resource by the end of this month to hopefully free up a couple of hands on some of the more junior tasks, and then have us and the core team focus on more of the business development side of things. Since we are still speaking in the realm of finances, one note I wanted to make is that in our June meeting of the commission, we did take a few motions to grant slightly more independence and authority to this agency. So we are now, we've always been considered a component unit for the state's annual comprehensive financial report. However, we expect 2026 will be the first year will be material. So we will be going through the audit. We are pulling off of the Wolves system. While most state agencies use that, For us, it was becoming more complex to use that infrastructure because it was not reflecting blockchain balances or the reserves that we had. So we're moving on to our own financial infrastructure. We've been running books in parallel with Wolves since August of last year, so we're well reconciled. And July will be the first month that we'll be doing our own GASB reporting, rather than just reporting on the budget coming from the Wolves system. We do have our own EIN now. We have our own administrative accounts. We'll be able to reconcile to cash. And then one other critical item I wanted to highlight for this body, the commission has also compelled us to enter into competitive negotiation with a special purpose depository institution for the purposes of holding administrative account for the agency. In short, the hope and the goal there would be to engage with one of Wyoming's chartered bodies and move some portion or a large portion or all of our budget into the SPDI, perhaps as frontier tokens or perhaps as tokenized deposits. And I would look perhaps by the end of this year to be the first government agency in the world that has its entire budget on a blockchain. And if we can do that, that means there's real-time expense reporting. That means there can be real-time attestations about the dollars we're spending. And there's candidly nothing more transparent than that in the world. And that'll be my great privilege to execute on that for the state by the end of this year. Before I shift to some
I'm sorry,
technology
Director.
and
Mr.
scaling,
Chairman.
please.
Thank you. Director Apollo, on the selection of the Speedy, what's the timeline? Can you walk us through the selection timeline?
Director.
So through the chair, Mr. Co-Chair, because there is a limited number of SPDIs, rather than a full procurement, this will be competitive negotiation through the procurement rules that have been statutorily granted. We have the ability to do kind of a customized procurement that's more technically focused, and competitive negotiation is part of that. So we would expect that to hopefully the actual competitive process be done by the end of Q3 with the full implementation done by the end of this year, although I hope it'd be done sooner than that.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the committee? Director, please proceed.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So going back into the technology piece here specifically, I will remind this body that when we kicked this process off, the select committee did give us encouragement to adopt a multi-chain and technology agnostic platform. So we do have this, kind of internal mandate to be multi-chain and to expand that as different blockchains meet our criteria. We do run a quarterly blockchain selection exercise. We've continued doing that. We continue refining criteria along the way. I will note that we are now live on 8 interoperable blockchains, which I mentioned earlier. We now have several additional candidate blockchains that we are testing behind the scenes and can potentially deploy on the near future. Those are Aptos, Etherlink, Monad, Say, Stellar, Sui, and Tempo. So that to get into that candidate blockchain frame, those all need to pass our binary criteria. So they need to have a minimum set of abilities, including things like freeze and seize, but they also need support from our existing vendors. So as more blockchains become supported by, let's say, Fireblocks, which we use for our digital wallet management, more of these chains can come online. Beyond that, there's 2 more kind of exciting announcements in the technical realm. One is our team has been testing what's called the X402 extension. Essentially, this is payment rails built into the native fabric of the universe. If you've ever gone to a website that didn't exist and got a 404 error, that is kind of a codified portion of how the internet works. When the World Wide Web was built out in the early 90s, they kind of reserved a payment gate at the 402 bridge, the 402 pathway. That went untapped and unused until recently, and now a lot of the payment providers, the very ones that Representative Yin was alluding to earlier, are all looking to essentially deploy technology into that bridge for quicker and more rapid payments or agentic payments, right? So if your AI is trying to buy things on the internet, X402 is a mechanism by which your AI can pay for services or products. It's also something that our team has been working on. We do have a demo of the Frontier stable token being transacted across that X402 bridge. Our Chief Information Security Officer, Keith Lawhorn, presented that in DC, hosted by the Global Business Blockchain Council. He did perform a demonstration of that, and that was very well received. We'll continue building that out, but we are very much on the vanguard with that, and working alongside our partners to make sure that our token infrastructure works with this new payment rail that will likely be adopted through the proliferation of artificial intelligence as well. And then finally, I'm not sure if I'm able to name the partner in this format, but I will note that one of the things we've talked about along the way is the need for privacy protections in stable token and stablecoin payments. So we've partnered with a team recently that I believe can put our frontier token in what I refer to as the Goldilocks zone, which is there's now technology that we could use that would obfuscate sender and receiver addresses as well as amounts of the token going back and forth on a public blockchain. So whoever's viewing the blockchain doesn't know who's transacting and how much, but we as the issuing body of the stable token would be able to have insight into those transactions and an audit trail so we can ensure that there's no illicit activity happening with those addresses. So we are looking to have a pilot program live with that, again, hopefully by end of the quarter, actively working on that one. Again, that's tasked to our CISO, Mr. Keith Lawhorn, and more to come on that, hopefully at our September meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Paulo, on that application, so that would be effectively a new or alternative chain implementation that allows utilization in the same way as it's being utilized now, as Frontier is being utilized now, but as an alternative chain, it would have those characteristics in addition to the other required characteristics. Is that an accurate description? Director?
So through the chair, Mr. Co-Chair, it's actually a little bit better than that, which is that it's not one blockchain, nor is it blockchain specific. It started out that way, but the architecture as it stands now is kind of a level of abstraction, kind of above the chain. So you can have multiple different blockchains, many of the ones that we've launched on. You can then kind of bridge your token to this new platform, kind of sits above all of them, meant specifically as payment rails, and can transact across any number of different payment platforms, other wallets. There's wallet technology that's built into this specific offering. And this is something where, again, without just minding some of the discussions we've had, this would be a great piece of technology for our local entrepreneurs, let's say, to get set up with, because you can have omnibus wallets when you register for this platform. So if you are running a local coffee shop and you're trying to figure out how to get on board with our stable token, and you don't want to set up individual employees with individual wallets because they may just walk off with them, and you don't want to shell out for a much more expensive institutional account that's a centralized exchange, this particular platform would allow you to have all the protections of that institutional custodian, but all of the efficiencies of having a self-custodied wallet. So again, it would live as a level of abstraction kind of above the chains, but still use kind of its own blockchain technology in its own way. I know I'm being a little abstract. I'm happy to follow up with you on this one.
Yeah.
Outside of the confines of this discussion.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none, please proceed, Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a few things now. We're jumping back to, we had already talked about the licensed service providers and our pursuit of them. We've created a licensed service provider onboarding portal, which has all of our legal documentation and onboarding forms. We've created a one-stop shop for anyone who's interested in becoming a reseller of the stable token. So if anyone in the audience is interested in becoming part of that network, please do reach out. We have the link for you. And then I will also note that in terms of scaling, it's quite important for us now that we're live, we do need to get this token circulating. And there's a couple different approaches we've had for this. One approach would be what I refer to as bottom up. And this effort is being led by Stephanie Chan on our team. She's going around county by county. She's going to different universities. She's hosting speaking sessions. She's onboarding. She's doing blockchain 101. She's providing education about what the Frontier stable token is and going around the state getting people signed up with wallets. Right, it's important we have the groundswell of local support, and she is certainly busting her hump getting that done across the state of Wyoming. My time is more focused on the top-down perspective. So we mentioned, for example, some of the conversations other states were having, but one of the other initiatives I'm working on with our CFO, Joseph Saldana, is on how other state agencies can utilize the Frontier token and what impediments there may be to that process. So I believe one use case, for example, that we've discussed in the past is the unclaimed property division of the state treasurer's office. They have this bucket of funds. There are valid claimants to those funds. However, there are fees assessed by the correspondent banks between the treasurer's office and that claimant in terms of getting their own funds back. The hope is we could use the Frontier stable token to make that an incredibly efficient and incredibly cheap process in the near future. However, one of the impediments to doing that is that the unclaimed property division, their statute allows them to deal with intangible assets, which include things like money, but does not include things like virtual currency at this point in time. So along the way, in the last interim, one of the conversations we had was about, whether it was worthwhile to call the stable token a cash equivalent. And that could be one potential path forward here that would make this much easier for all agencies to simply adopt the Frontier token. However, I would caution that there may be constitutional concerns around that and may also throttle our ability in the future to issue a yield-bearing stable token. So again, that's something we've discussed before in this forum. But one of the things that we've done more recently, again, with some tool assistance, is feed artificial intelligence the full statute for the state of Wyoming, and then query it for agencies with a financial remit and see where there may or may not be friction and where there may or may not be a lift for other agencies to use the Frontier stable token. So I did not provide this document because not everything in here is vetted. Of course, I want to be very specific before I present anything. Anything we do with assistance from artificial intelligence has to be vetted, sourced to make sure there's no hallucinations and artificial intelligence is not making up its own statute or own references. So we're still going through some of these documents because they are quite robust. But what I do want to quickly share is a view of what this looks like now and what we're working on to kind of bring us through an agency by agency perspective of how this token can be utilized in the state and then leverage that exemplar for other states in the future. So I believe this is it. Hopefully this shows up for you because all my windows just moved around. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this in the room, so I'll just walk through some of the critical components of this. Essentially, we fed all 13,000 plus pages of the Wyoming state statute to artificial intelligence, trained it up on what we're doing with the Frontier stable token, and then queried it for how Front can be used between different agencies. One of the first things it discovered was recurring patterns of friction, as it calls it. And that's the first thing it found is what we had already talked about in the past, which is gates around enumerated categories of property or money that omit virtual currency. That again includes the example we just talked about with the unclaimed property division. Second is maybe a form of payment requirement, i.e. statute specifies there has to be a check, a warrant, something like SNAP. And we see that with the auditor's office. Then there's lawful money of the United States. Again, we are not money. We're not trying to be money. We're not trying to contravene the Constitution. So that's another consideration. And then there are federal preemptions as well. So again, without running through all of these, just to share a bit with this committee, what we were able to determine was, again, on a by-agency basis, where there may be statutory impediments, and then what would be required to amend statute to bring this forward or better integrate a stable token or a virtual currency in the state of Wyoming to these agencies' operations. Again, you see these kind of key friction points at the top. The state treasurer's office has the constitutional warrant requirement. The state auditor has warrants upon the treasurer for money. Again, we're not money. I think we're well versed in that now. But when we get into some of these other agencies, we get into things like filing fees for the Secretary of State's office. There may not be many impediments to doing that, integrating the token there. The Wyoming retirement system may be another one. We've seen in this document, for example, the minerals taxes can be paid with tokens. So our goal as an organization is to clean this all up and then provide this to the select committee as well as the commission once we have an idea and a confirmation of what this prioritization could look like. And to that extent, on the prioritization effort, one more thing I wanted to share, and outside of this specific document, is a little bit of additional research, again, with our CFO, Mr. Joe Saldana, that we've done on the Wyopen platform. So for those who may not be aware, Wyopen is the state's financial transparency platform. Every transaction that goes to the state is represented in Wyopen. You are able to pull all of that data down, and our CFO has done that. He's also gone and created a number of different carve-outs of that data to see which agencies are paying which vendors, what payments are going out of state, and queried all of that data to figure out where, again, we should be spending our time to perhaps cut down on fees where possible. I will also quickly share that one of our pilot partners called Hashfire, unbeknownst to us, was doing very much the same exercise. And they've created an entire front end for all of this information, essentially a much more legible version of going through all of it in Excel. So to quickly share that, and I think many on this commission may know John Belitsky, who's running the program over there. Hashfire is now working on this for pretty much every state they can, because everyone typically has their own payment transparency dashboards. So what you can do is pull in any vendor name here. If I pull in myself, I don't know if that'll work because I am technically someone who's received reimbursements. This platform will tell you, how many dollars may be in motion now based on some prediction patterns, but it tells you who's getting paid what, again, using myself as the vendor here, all different kinds of intelligence about when and where and how payments are happening. And there's plenty in there. There's also vendors by agency, so you can see who we paid how much to. There is different levels to this. There is anomaly detection as well. So one of the things we're looking at doing with this platform is using it to kind of fine-tune anomaly detection with Wyoming's very controlled financial ecosystem. I don't know if this will load while we're here, but the goal here is to get this running for the state of Wyoming, see where we can implement the Frontier token to make these transactions much more efficient and transparent, and then use this as a full package to essentially export to other states. Again, Wyoming, relatively fraud-free. If you listen to the governor's State of the State earlier this year to kick off the session, we're hundreds of, maybe $400 of Medicare fraud on $1 billion balance. We're third lowest in the nation when it comes to SNAP fraud. There's not a whole lot here. So if we're able to look at some of these different payment flows and identify and lock in where there may be some anomalies, and again, fine-tune how those are being picked up, we can export this to different states that are having more difficulties with fighting waste, fraud, and abuse, which is something that many states have initiatives for right now, that the federal government is working on right now, that the State Foundation of Financial Officers is working on right now. So much more to come with this. But again, this is all public information. It's just a easier way to look at it and run some models on top of it for potentially real-time anomaly detection if these transactions were being done with a stable token on a blockchain rather than reported at year end after an audit, for example. And now I've once again thrown quite a lot at you in one shot. So I will pause there. And I think that's about the end of what I wanted to share this morning anyway, before we move on to some of the other sections. But I will pause there for questions, noting that Commissioner Pope does have a hand up.
Thank you, Director. Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to back up a little bit and just provide a little bit of input. I think one of the highest goals that I have for this next session is to encourage the legislature to identify the stable token as a short-term cash equivalent. And the reason, there are a couple of reasons for that, and I think we can avoid any sort of constitutional issue. Is short-term cash equivalency, of course, is more of an accounting definition under U.S. GAAP, and if we are able to identify the stable token as that form of asset, then it creates a cascade effect throughout Wyoming's government, allowing it to use or it may allow it to use every department to use the Frontier stable token, especially departments that say you can only use cash. Now, there may be specific instances where we have to go through and conform the statutes within the departments in order to allow payment in both receipts and payment in short-term cash equivalents as well as cash. But the other item that I want to bring up, and we will have more time to discuss it tomorrow with the banking side, is that then banks within the state may be more comfortable adopting Front and using it and placing it on their balance sheet as a short-term cash equivalent. So that's certainly something that I think is necessary if we're going to be able to achieve widespread use within the state government. Oops.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to follow up on that, but before we get to that, just to point out, because Director Apollo transitioned into the discussion of government utilization of Frontier stable token, I just think it's important for us to put that in context, that one of our priorities during this interim is to ensure that the state of Wyoming can engage in transactions in Frontier and look for ways to integrate Frontier use wherever possible, wherever plausible. And we've seen statutory barriers to doing that. And, Director Apollo has done excellent analysis of going through and finding those. So this will result in a bill draft. We'll put something together. We'll try and figure out how to remedy it. But it's obviously critical that we do that. Getting to a question for Mr. Pope, and I don't know if he has the answer for this or if this is something we'll just have to delve into more broadly. But getting to the concept of short-term cash equivalency, if we're defining that in statute, my wonder at this point, and maybe Mr. Revel will have some sense of this as well, how much we can say about that definitionally for a state chartered entity from a banking commission regulation perspective in defining that. Are we able to define a short-term cash equivalency such that a state chartered financial institution can look to that definition? Or are we deflected by the feds because they've preempted us in some way through their definitions? And I don't know that. And we could probably ask Jeremiah tomorrow or whenever the commissioner's here. But does anyone have a sense of that? Mr. Pope, do you have a sense of that? Or Mr. Revel, do you have a sense of that?
Commissioner Pope, Mr. Revel?
I will take a stab at it first, and then Mr. Revel probably has a ton more experience than I do. But again, this is the banking system looks to U.S. GAAP rules primarily, with a few very few exceptions. And right now, I am currently working with the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance, who has a heavy membership from the AICPA, which is the governing body, and for the accounting institutions, and this is an ongoing discussion there. I believe that we need to work concurrently on a state level and on the national level in order to achieve it. But really, we already should qualify as a short-term cash equivalent, because it typically includes investments with 3-month maturities or less from the date of purchase, and highly liquid. And technically, I believe we already conform to that, but it is the fact that it is a digital asset that is the only real barrier. So that's my only input on it. And maybe Mr. Revel has other thoughts.
Mr. Revel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Without a little bit more research, I would qualify this as just my speculation. I would agree with Mr. Pope. That's a FASB or an accounting definition. And so I don't think there would be an issue in using the term short-term cash equivalent for purposes of accounting. I think for banks to be able to treat it as such, that becomes more a question of the Fed and the FDIC. If that's the goal for this. And so I think that it's not going to be viewed as a bank deposit, because there aren't balances at the Federal Reserve, or there aren't there's not FDIC insurance behind it. So I don't think it's going to be the terminology used. It's going to be whether it's part of the Fed system or it has FDIC behind it, that will kind of determine how banks will be able to treat it. And if I'm understanding the question correctly, that would be my view.
Thank you. And that makes sense. And what I don't know, and we probably have to ask the commissioner about, is, I mean, banks also take in cash, right? So they're holding US dollars. And I guess that's going to probably still fall into a separate category that we can't put, since we can't put the Wyoming Frontier stable token as a true equivalent. We can't define it that way. That's going to be federally defined. We'll be accepted from that. I was just trying to find a way where we can give as much flexibility as possible to our state chartered financial institutions to make payments and transact and also operate in this space, and ideally take deposits as well, if they choose to, in Frontier in an equivalent way. But it does make sense that if the FDIC doesn't see it as appropriate, then it doesn't matter whether the state sees it as appropriate. They won't have their FDIC insurance, and they'll need that to back it. But again, as we're looking at this legislation, trying, Mr. Chairman, to figure out how we can make it as broadly allowable as possible, where to the greatest extent possible, our institutions can utilize Frontier as a cash equivalent. And I see Mr. Pope has his hand back up.
Commissioner Pope.
Just one final thought on that. Banks, just like all institutions, have their assets classified, and not necessarily as deposits, but they also have short-term cash equivalent investments as well that can be utilized in order to show the backing for their deposits, and that's the area that I'm that I would be focusing on and that I would ask the commissioner about tomorrow, because that's if they can use those as part of their balance sheet as something other than just an offshoot or a novelty holding, then I think that's what's optimal with this, because again, they have their reserve requirements, they have and other things that they have to meet. So I'm with Mr. Co-Chair that you in that we need to make this as broad as possible, and we need to lay the foundation so that later on, when FASB, when FDIC, when all of those organizations, if they amend their rules, we are not the sticking point in the use of it within the state.
Mr. Chairman, any other questions?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the committee? Director Apollo, I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about our potential for international collaboration.
Mr. Chairman, can do. Couple things I'll reference because I know we didn't have our November meeting last year. So I was invited to attend and speak at Korea Blockchain Week last year, which I did, and then went to Japan shortly thereafter. In Korea, we did meet with members of the National Assembly who are working on stablecoin and digital asset policy for the country, as well as members of the legal teams advising the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, which is now has the preponderance of the Japanese parliament, as they look to rework their digital asset policy, because Japan has been a leader for quite some time, unfortunately precipitated by the Mt. Gox hack, I think back in 2014, but I digress. Both of those parties express concern about US dollar dominance in the stablecoin sector. So stablecoins right now, it's $300 billion market cap on the whole industry. People think it'll 10x over the next 5 years to $3 to $4 trillion. That's coming from Citigroup. That's coming from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. These are not numbers we're pulling out of the ether, pun not intended. But there is concern abroad that different fiat currencies may be left behind this digital transformation if they don't get their frameworks correct. And that's why there's as Mr. Land pointed out earlier, there's such an impetus for the US to get the Clarity Act through on the back of the Genius Act. We've already seen the Genius Act galvanize so much activity in the stablecoin space. We want America to keep leading. But that all being said, first thing to note is we presented a new offering to both of those parties. They were looking at it very much as, well, either we have to issue a central bank digital currency, which people are a little skittish about for obvious reasons we've discussed before, or you're going to hand this whole thing over to the private sector. We come along as a public good and public utility, public infrastructure, as something in the middle that they weren't aware of. And now that they're certainly looking into what that might look like in their own jurisdictions. The other thing that's interesting to consider is what it looks like for us to integrate with large multinational organizations that may be domiciled in South Korea or Japan, because both of those frameworks would require, yen-based stablecoins or won-based stablecoins for use domestically in those respective countries. But if they're multinational automobile manufacturers, technology providers, entertainment companies, most of their global work is going to be settled in dollars. So there's a lot of interest in creating that connective tissue between different stablecoins of different, with different fiat backing to them. Not dissimilar from a technical perspective, as what I mentioned to Co-Chair Rothfuss earlier about going from a tokenized deposit to a stable coin from inside of a bank to something that can be self-custodied. Some of these discussions are around, well, we can create what's called a liquidity pool, essentially a pool of digital assets on a blockchain that would likely be open source. Anyone could use it, where you'd have a US dollar denominated stable token on one side, the Frontier token, a yen-based or a won-based stablecoin on the other. And having these decentralized pools of capital will allow people to go in and out of them of their own volition. So there's interest there, but that's how I first started thinking about this, although there's certainly more of a decentralized flavor to that. On the more institutional side of things, what we're seeing is platforms like Ubix, that's UBYX, spin up as a stablecoin and fiat settlement layer between many different GSIBs and governmental entities all over the world. So they're essentially providing the plumbing in the back end that can do this settlement of fiats and stables behind the scenes, essentially what that would allow someone to do with the Wyoming stable token, for example, is send 10 front to someone's digital wallet address at Lloyd's of London in the UK. And then within 10 minutes, that 10 front that I sent to a digital wallet will be converted to Great British pounds in their bank account. And those are the types of transformations we're talking about that are now being built behind the scenes. These are not overt things. These are not manually using a self-cussied wallet in some cases, but this is the technical fabric that's being built at some of the world's largest financial institutions to solve the issue and the complexity of what you're talking about.
Thank you, Director. See no questions from the committee. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Mr. Chairman, I think at this time, I've probably said my piece on the Stable Token Commission update. There's always more new and exciting news coming out of our side. I hope to see everybody at Frontier Days to get their hands on a digital wallet from Rain and some of the front being provided by the Avalanche Foundation. But I'm happy to stand for any questions. And with that said, Mr. Chairman, I will be on standby for the upcoming segments of the conversation.
Alrighty, thank you. With that, we'll continue right along to state government utilization of the Frontier stable token. We touched on that with the previous testimony, but Aaron Courtney.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Aaron Courtney, Associate Vice President of Budget and Institutional Planning for the University of Wyoming. I'll keep my introduction brief this morning and stand for questions, as this is an exciting topic for the university and we're looking forward to some continued partnership. In April, we met with Chairman Rothfuss and Stephanie Chan to discuss some possibilities of accepting stablecoin for student payments, tuition and fees, as well as other opportunities that maybe would exist with the Frontier stable token. In the meantime, we have reached out to our payment processor who doesn't currently accept or process stablecoin payments. We have, however, found that we do partner with about 4 different companies that are accepting stablecoin, and we're excited to continue to explore and further those explorations with those companies. In addition to Director Apollo mentioning Avalanche and Rain functionality, we're actually really excited to see what the digital wallet will hold for our students. Coming from it in a consumer perspective, we want to make sure that we have as many different payment options as we can for our students and families as they are paying their student fees and other auxiliary payments, and really excited about that, but also looking for ways not only to save money for those consumers, but also for the University of Wyoming. We're looking forward to our continued partnership with the commission as well as the select committee. And Mr. Chairman, I would love to take any questions that you have.
Any questions for Mr. Courtney? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Courtney, thanks for the follow-up on this, and thanks for the meeting earlier to kind of look at and consider the possibilities and where we might be able to provide improvement. The first question I have, do you feel that you have any statutory barriers to taking Frontier stable token, for example, as a payment method right now? Would you need a statutory revision to feel comfortable with that, or is that something that you don't do because it's just not something that's been implemented?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, we would definitely want to look into that to make sure that we were able to, from a statutory compliance, be able to take that. The digital wallet and being able to take a Visa-backed or MasterCard-backed payment, feeling very comfortable with that, but we would definitely like to dig into the statutory pieces.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Courtney, do you have a sense of the breakdown for how much of tuition, how many dollars of tuition, for example, each year is processed through payment rails of some sort, so not by check, I guess I'll say.
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, we have a breakdown. We have a significant amount that is still being paid by credit card payments when it comes to student fees to the tune of about $12 million per year that families are putting on a credit card. We see great potential in finding an alternative that would save them money as well as save the university money.
Great. And Mr. Chairman, another area that we had a little discussion about was over in athletics. I don't know what the total amount of expenditures there that would be credit card based, but I assume that's also pretty significant. Do you have that number, an estimate?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I do not have the athletic one up in front of me. They are our second largest credit card receiving entity on the campus. There would be good potential there as well as other units across campus. In our discussion in April, we focused in on student payments as well as athletics, but there are several different places across campus that we could see this having some great benefit.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, what are those? I'm sort of curious to see what the scope could be is. And I think, Mr. Chairman, I think the University of Wyoming is a great test case, obviously, because the University of Wyoming publicly transacts with our public tens of millions of dollars, as we're hearing about every year, in many, many different ways. So it seems like an excellent early pilot to try to get engaged and find solutions. And then hopefully those solutions can be looked at by other institutions, not just our colleges, which obviously could be looking to that pilot, but our agencies and county clerks and everyone else. So it's a great place to start. But what other use cases, Mr. Courtney, have you identified?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, we're starting to explore a handful of different avenues to really look into, including how we do business with the public as well, how we make our payments, how we internally pay kind of department to department as well, and see if there would be any use case that we could provide, as well as maybe a cost savings as well. But to get money from department to department is definitely one that we're looking into.
Mr. Chairman?
And Mr. Chairman, right now is that I assume that is currently probably moving money from one pocket to another pocket. I assume those are all internal accounts in a University of Wyoming held account, and then you are accounting for the change, but the money does not move, so to speak, in a financial institution way. Is that accurate?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, that's accurate statement, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we look to this, I guess a couple of questions. The first is, do we see any immediate barriers? Is there anything that you've identified that you would need from us at this time, statutorily? It sounds like that's something you'll look more into. But what can we do to help facilitate? I'll start there.
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, great question. Obviously, the statutory question will take high priority. One thing is we continue to go down this road, looking at APIs with some of our existing vendors, if this were to be a possibility, what the cost of that API would be to be able to do transactions for the public. We'll have to get our heads together with those companies, but I could see that one being a potential. But yeah, the statutory one, making sure that we are obviously compliant and able to do this would be of top priority.
Yeah. And Mr. Chairman, not to volunteer more work for Mr. Apollo, who's on the call also, but Mr. Courtney, Mr. Apollo and his team might just know how to facilitate exactly what you need in an immediate way. And at the same time, our special purpose depository institutions in the state are obviously expert at facilitating transactions in the digital asset space as well. So there might be a partnership opportunity available where we can just partner up with a Wyoming financial institution that has this wherewithal. But I'd look to Mr. Apollo. He wasn't able to join our earlier conversation, but he's certainly been briefed in it, and see if Mr. Apollo has any thoughts or questions as we're exploring this space with spinning up the University of Wyoming to accept Frontier.
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair. Yes, it would be important for us to get an idea. And again, pardon that I wasn't able to participate in the first meeting. I did have a chance to catch up with Mr. Courtney yesterday on some of the platforms that they are using. So I think there's a bit of outreach on our side to figure out, where we can integrate well. One of the reasons why we pursued that X402 extension that I was talking about a little earlier is because that could hypothetically make some of these integrations easier. That being said, I think really the crux of what we're trying to do with the Frontier token and Wyoming stable tokens generally is create public infrastructure that is low to no cost, highly transparent, and settles with immediacy. So one kind of non-specific flag that I would have for this conversation, I have for many conversations, is if we're going to integrate this, I'd want to make sure that as we have these discussions, the counterparties understand the crux of what we've created, and we don't get back into a system now where fees are being assessed on the ease of stable token usage, right? Because especially if you could just go peer-to-peer, that's certainly one way to do it. So I think there's plenty of considerations to be had about meeting with the different providers as they currently stand, whether or not things like procurement would be needed. And again, this is beyond just the university's use case, just generally speaking for payment platforms within the state. If other procurement's needed, or if the infrastructure we built can satisfy agency needs just with what we've built in-house, and we can keep fees to functionally $0 and put real money back in our constituents' pockets.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's something where I think, again, this early pilot, the university working with our commission to figure out what is a template for other entities and agencies throughout the state, because we don't want every state entity to have to reinvent the wheel and go through a procurement process. It would be much better if there is a template solution, which is a state level solution that we implement once effectively, and then anybody else that wants access to it or needs access to it can utilize whatever rails or whatever it is that we create with relatively low work. Because obviously the University of Wyoming and the commission has expertise. University of Wyoming has a tremendous amount of resources available and expertise to do these kinds of things. But the county clerk of Niobrara County is going to need a solution which is more a plug and play opportunity. Does that seem like a reasonable approach? I'll ask both Mr. Courtney and Mr. Apollo. Is this a path that we can take? We'll obviously be drafting some legislation on trying to make sure that we're facilitating the statutory side, but I want to make sure that we have a sensible path forward on the implementation side.
Gentlemen?
Sure, happy to chime in. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, that's exactly how we're thinking about it here. And it may not be Niobrara, but I do have the map behind me. With Converse County, just as a quick aside, we had Converse County Treasurer Joel Shell join one of our public commission meetings in November of last year and provide testimony to the extent that his county collected $3.4 million in tax remittances in 2024, and it cost his constituents $70,000 to do it. So he's been taking a very granular look at what we've built, getting familiar with digital assets for exactly the reason that you're talking about, which is how do we integrate this to create kind of a one-stop shop for the citizens of Wyoming so they can just use this technology without having to worry about different integrations. How do we put wallet infrastructure in the back end while also keeping fees low? Some of this will be science, some of this will be art, but those are exactly the conversations that we're having.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
And that might be a good way to approach it also, is get Mr. Shell involved. And I know he's been involved and following along with what we've been doing for quite a while, and get a small group of early users that can be part of the discussion and part of that preliminary build out with Mr. Courtney and Mr. Apollo's team. Mr. Shell and if there's anyone else to get involved, to have a small working group for implementation side, and we can continue to check in with that group as we move through the interim. Anything that we're missing, Mr. Courtney, that we should be looking at or considering from your perspective?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, no, I think this is a great start. We're excited to partner with the commission as well as work with this committee in the future, and excited for what the future holds with the stable token.
Excellent. And, another organization that maybe we reach out to, and they're probably watching right now, our Community College Commission, and engage them as well and see what they're using and what they do for payments. And Mr. Courtney, maybe you're aware if they use similar merchants and vendors to what you have, or if they all have their own individual vendors, but I'm sure that they take the bulk of their transactions are going to be similar to your transactions, where it's going to be largely a credit card system. Is that fair?
Mr. Courtney?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, not completely sure what systems they do have, but I would imagine that it's going to be a very similar credit card cash check opportunity.
Great, thank you. One more question for Mr. Apollo, if I may. Mr. Apollo, anyone else, unclaimed property, anyone else that you see as the early adopters from within the state or local subdivision communities, university unclaimed property, county treasurers like Mr. Shell, anyone else that we should be bringing in on this early implementation side of things?
Director?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, I would advocate for YDOT being involved. We've had a number of conversations with them around their upcoming e-titling initiative. Similar to what we've seen, somewhat tangential, but similar to what we've seen like the supply chain use case. There's a lot of interest around potentially putting titles on chain, perhaps tethered to digital identity. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But using stable tokens to pay for titles, using smart contracts to make sure that titles on chain can't move from one party to another if there's a lien on it. Those are some conversations that we've had with the YDOT team. And it does sound like there's some interest there, especially with potential pilots at hand. Again, not too much I could say about that in the current format, but there is certainly some interest there, and some other large organizations that would be keeping a close eye on that if we were to put some of that into the public realm.
Great, that sounds excellent. Have you had much engagement with Department of Revenue?
Director?
To the chair, Mr. Co-Chair, I have not, but they are certainly on the list.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I do just want to say that this is an incredible opportunity for us to make our own operations within the government of Wyoming, but as well as interactions between citizens and the state of Wyoming, such as students that want to pursue their education. This is an opportunity to make that more efficient and get one step closer to the most affordable type of education in the state of Wyoming. And so I'm really grateful that we're able to explore that. That's pretty neat. Director Apollo, you have your hand up.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, one I forgot to mention was also the Office of Tourism. There is some interest in looking at this program almost as an export of the state of Wyoming. Again, there's nothing binding the use of the Frontier token to the four corners of this state. It's meant to be a globally used product and initiative, as we had talked about when some of the international relationships are looking to develop. So we have had a couple of conversations with Director Dominic Bravo, and those are certainly ongoing as well. So if we're going to create, let's call it a working group on this for in-state and out-of-state usage with in-state resources, I would certainly look to tag in some representatives from their team. We actually spoke to their board maybe 2 or 3 months ago as well to give them the full rundown of what we're building.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to see Frontier tokens used during Frontier Days. That'd be great.
They are. Yeah.
So, all right. Any other comments from the committee? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll return and continue with the conversation about the Utah State Endorsed Digital Identity Program.
Yeah, it does. You can gavel if you want to. There you go. Come on, gavel. There you go. That's a gavel.
All right, if we can get back into order here, we'll go ahead and continue. But before we get to our next point on the agenda, I would like to acknowledge that Representative Riggins has graced us with his presence here today. Welcome. We're grateful to have you here. Oh, a local representative. That's fantastic. Thank you for being here. So this earlier this year, I had the opportunity to visit the state of Utah and learn a little bit about their state endorsed digital identity program. And though it's different from how we're approaching things here in the state of Wyoming, I do think it's really valuable to know what's going on with our neighbors and just the types of struggles that they've faced, but also the legislation that's come out of that. So it's a SETI is what they call it, the Utah State Endorsed Digital Identity Program. It was created by SB 275 in 2026. It's a voluntary digital ID system, and it allows Utah residents to get a secure state endorsed digital identity version of their identity, like a driver's license or an ID card that they can store in a mobile wallet or on their phone. The main purpose is to give people a more convenient and secure way to prove who they are in today's digital world for things like age verification, government services, or business transactions, while minimizing the amount of personal data that they have to share each time. And it's completely optional. No one is required to use it, and physical ID remains fully valid. This entire SETI program is based upon something that they've passed called the Digital Bill of Rights. And there are 11 different rights written directly into law that come from this bill. It's that your identity is innate to your existence and independent of the state, that it's fundamental and inalienable. You always have the right to manage and control your own digital identity to protect your privacy. You always have the right to use a physical ID instead of a digital ID. The state cannot compel you to use a digital ID. You have the right to state endorsement if you meet clear objective standards. There cannot be an arbitrary denial. The system must operate under transparent legislative standards that are open for review. You have the right to selective disclosure, sharing only the specific information needed for each situation. No service or benefit can be denied based on whether you choose a physical or digital ID. And it guarantees strong protections against surveillance, tracking, or profiling by the state. And the government cannot force you to surrender your phone or device to present your ID. And so that's really the core of what Utah has done. They've also created the guarantee that if you want to access any of your information, that it's available in paper format as well as digitally. So guaranteeing that access to paper format is available to the citizens that don't want to have a digital format, that's encapsulated as well. And so I went as well as Director Apollo. And so I don't know if I'm what I missed, Director, but if you want to fill in the gaps, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you touched on the most important thing, which is it's not a compulsory program. In a similar way to how we've constructed the stable token, one of the things we mentioned in our user agreement is, we cannot mandate use of the stable token. It's there. Great that you want to use it, but we can't mandate it. You start getting into some of these currency concerns for us. There's a similar corollary on the identity side. And I think Mr. Chairman relayed that well. One of the very interesting things to me was that the technology stack on which SETI is being built on, it's under their Department of Government Operations, and it's somewhat of an open source framework. So when the chairman and I were at the SETI summit, there were a number of different technical providers who are all demonstrating what they've built on top of the SETI infrastructure. One of those was a tool for commerce. One of those was a tool for health data, which is obviously quite important for the appropriate HIPAA protections to be in place there. So I found that to be quite interesting. And then, I know it sounds like when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But there were some interesting blockchain considerations to some of those programs being built. Not that they're programs necessarily on-chain or has to be on-chain. But some of the interesting things you can do with a piece of technology called zero knowledge proofs is provide a binary response to a query without revealing the underlying information. That's already very highfalutin. So to translate that down, if you're trying to get into a bar or buy a bottle of alcohol, you need to be over 21 years old in most places. However, if you hand your ID over to someone like a driver's license, that's going to then show your birth date on it. If you need to prove where you live, you need to share your physical ID is going to have your address on there. What you can do with these digital identity programs is obfuscate the actual data, but still return the appropriate response. So instead of needing to know when someone's birthday is specifically, which can then be used to get into some of their accounts if you have other pieces of information that could compromise them, you simply get returned the response, this person is over 21 years old. Similarly, for an address, you might not want people to know where you live. So using these methods of obfuscation, you can say and attest that this person is a resident of the state of Utah without saying I live on XYZ street. And I think that's quite an important consideration there. One thing that I wanted to communicate in this forum, Mr. Chairman mentioned the Digital Bill of Rights and read through some of what is included in there. My own personal opinion on some of this is, the reason why data is important is because everyone's trying to monetize it. And I think that if Wyoming was to pursue this route, again, this is very much my personal opinion here, what I would like to see is some kind of clause that would require data brokers or others who are monetizing the data of citizens, perhaps without their knowledge, or probably in most cases without their knowledge, be required to provide some kind of incentive to citizens for using their data for any kind of pool that they're building, information system they're building, training data they're building for artificial intelligence. I think that's a key component, and that's something that's not in the Digital Bill of Rights for Utah. That's a piece of feedback I did give to some of the folks who are working on it. But that to me was, I think it's a good foundation. I think there's a couple other, again, tweaks that it may receive along the way as it gets brought to fruition. Again, not different from launching with the Stable Token Act and then refining it through amendments over time. But I did want to communicate that one piece of feedback, which is, if there's going to be still going to be data brokers, and these are not things that are going away, giving citizens more protections to opt into those data sets, which is already covered, but if they do opt in, being able to monetize the provision of their data. And I will pause there.
Thank you, Director. Any questions from the committee? Any comments? Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, maybe a question for you or Anthony, whoever has the answer for this. Did Utah solve the privacy issue? So when I hand someone my ID at the store, the only parties that know I handed them the ID is me and the cashier. With the digital identity, especially, when we talked about, we had a porn bill and you need to do age verification for that. There's another party that actually gets to see that transaction, which is the government, right? So the government knows that you've checked your identity and you checked it with this provider. And I'm curious whether Utah fixed the problem where the government doesn't know who you're checking your age or identity, et cetera, with, that they're not a party to knowing who you are verifying with.
Thank you, Representative Yin. So, in how I'm understanding what they did in Utah, they made it so instead of having like in other states, in like Montana, for example, you can have a digital ID. You can have your driver's license on your phone, and that is the functioning quote unquote digital ID. But what Utah has done is, instead of just having the one certificate that is authenticated by the state, it's actually further under the hood than just the one document. And they then are able to de-identify some of that information instead of just broadly presenting like a date of birth or a physical address, that the ID itself is tied to one individual in a way that protects their privacy. And I'm not exactly sure on the technical side of things how they were able to accomplish that. And we can definitely get answers from them. They are very interested in collaborating with the state of Wyoming and seeing how we can make things work. And eventually, when we get to the point where if we want to offer that service from the state of Wyoming and have it be interoperable and recognized with other states that have digital driver's licenses, for example, that those same privacy standards would be enforced in all of the states that are participating. So, Director, do you have anything to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, I would reiterate what the chairman said about the de-identification of information in whichever, again, format of a database. I don't know what to necessarily call that, but that being said, I think we should follow up on, if I understood the question correctly, not only the data at rest, which may be, private and encrypted and obfuscated, but to Representative Yin's question, there likely will be an audit trail of who's querying the information. And I don't have a good answer for that one. So I've wrote that down as a takeaway. We can follow up with their team and get back to you on that one.
Any follow-up, Representative? Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, along those same lines, did they have any provisions? One of the challenges with digital identity, assuming that you're using your phone or some other personal device, is the idea of, instead of handing over your ID to somebody, handing over your phone to somebody is an awkward and poor idea. But it seems like a lot of the technology is leading that way. It doesn't have to lead that way. Was there any provision or thought or discussion on that aspect of it? Using something like a QR code that can be scanned. At that point, you need kind of two sides of the technology cooperating, and I don't know how or whether that's being addressed through their implementation or their intended implementation. Was that discussed? Because obviously you don't want to hand your cell phone. You're being asked whether you're 21. Handing your cell phone over is the wrong choice. With same concern with the digital driver's license. You really don't want to hand your cell phone to the police officer that comes and pulls you over and asks for your identification. So I was wondering if that was something that was discussed.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, that is interesting, because even if you have a digital ID, it would still be reliant upon a physical device to possess that digital ID. And so I would have to do some more research on how to answer that question specifically.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chairman?
Director.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, I don't recall seeing a specific demonstration of that functionality at the SETI Summit. However, that is one of the reasons why it's so interesting. They've built kind of the open framework within the Department of Government Operations such that other people can build on top of it. So those types of applications with tap to pay, again, and this is part of the reason why we're interested in this kind of initiative, it does share a lot of DNA with peer-to-peer transactions with digital wallets, right? For blockchain transactions or sending crypto or sending stable tokens, you need that QR code to be displayed with the appropriate information. You need a camera and some kind of corollary application to actually read that data. So whether that gets built out by the state or whether that is part of, what seems to be a healthy number of organizations in Utah building on top of that framework, I would expect perhaps a private interest to build that so that that data is transferable with just, QR code to reader or tap to read, tap to give information, rather than having to hand over your actual physical device to someone who may abscond with it.
Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last year, I shared an analogy about in physics, time machines, and engineers. I think if we provide the enabling legislation and the proper guardrails, then it comes down to the engineers and the application designers to be able to overcome some of those difficulties. So I would be all for looking at this seriously.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any other comment from the committee? Seeing none, I know that we have some public comment on this particular issue. We're gonna get through the rest of the what we have here, and then we'll open it up for public comment in a couple of minutes here, okay? All right. The next thing on the agenda is the tokenization of real-world assets.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
So we added this because this is obviously one of our interim discussion points, and don't have a bill at this point in time, but it's something that as we work through our next topic, which is digital asset authority, and as we work through the rest of the interim, this is something that we have on the radar to contemplate where we have any potential shortages in statute to do some of the things that we have interest in working on. And I know that there are a lot of parties that are working on tokenization of real world assets in various ways, whether that's real property or any of a variety of opportunities. But I wanted to make sure this was included on the agenda. First of all, for public comment standpoint, I don't know that we have anybody right now for public comment. I don't believe we did on this topic. Nope, not specifically. But calling it out as something that we will be weaving into the work of the Digital Asset Authority. So I don't know if anybody wants to chime in now with any early thoughts. Mr. Pope is back on the screen. He has a lot of interest and has been working on this space as well. But we don't have any specific presentation or material. I just wanted to make sure that we offered that opportunity for discussion at this time. And it's something that will be relevant as well. You know, there's interest of coming up with, it wouldn't be a stable token necessarily, but a new token through the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, potential Digital Asset Authority, which was an asset-backed token instead of a dollar-backed token. So a lot of potential here, a lot of discussion around it, but not necessarily a product at this time.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very glad that I don't have a surprise presentation to make about this. So, Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to lead the discussion with this. Back in 2018, Nevrut Sadev, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, at a conference that I attended, said that in the future, everything that can be tokenized will be tokenized, and everything can be tokenized. Well, this leads into discussion about how to completely reform and recreate the methodology of state finance along with private financing of almost any asset. So very important topic, something that I've been now working on for at least 7 or 8 years, and I think it's something that we can finally begin to address within the state.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any other comments from the committee? Any questions? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman.
Director.
So one thing I would Mr. Chairman, one thing I would bring up quickly is, past testimony from Commissioner Pope. As the committee thinks about this, one thing to keep in mind is when we think about tokenization, it's a pretty broad spectrum. Paxos has a product called Pax Gold. It's tokenized gold inside a vault somewhere in London, maybe elsewhere by now. You could redeem your tokens for the actual physical gold on delivery. It's probably one of the most kind of fortified programs they have. There's certainly other teams that are building this realm. There's tokenized uranium programs. Just one thing I would encourage this body to keep in mind, and Commissioner Pope again has brought this up in the past, is what are we trying, again, we'll come back to the Digital Asset Authority perhaps in a bit, but are we trying to generate the asset ourselves? Are we trying to regulate the asset? And if we are trying to generate the asset ourselves, where is the maximal value of a potential sovereign entity doing the tokenization and issuance of a real world asset? Commissioner Pope has brought up the comparison of, the spectrum tokenized, gold in a vault that's tokenized versus potential gold underground on state lands. Those projects, if you were to bring them to fruition, would have very little shared DNA, in my opinion. So I think it's just worthwhile to think about what the target is here, and then where the state can have the maximal benefit from getting involved in this space. And also, let's quickly flag, if it's helpful for the committee, there's certainly a number of folks in the Rolodex that we've got here who are working on these programs that we've met because they want to use stable tokens, stable coins to help with the value transfer of real world assets. And I'm sure no shortage of them would be happy to speak to this body if that is helpful.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman.
And along those lines, we're just talking about digital identity, and obviously this committee's been looking at digital identity for as long as it's existed, and trying to implement a cohesive system to enable it. We've passed legislation on digital identity, but digital identity is a central part of the real world asset tokenization if you want to use it in advanced capacity, where you have deeds and or licenses to some real world asset, having that linked or authorized to a digital identity is effectively a key way to provide that implementation. So all of this is part of the same mosaic, and we're trying to put together those pieces. Hopefully we can crack that nut on the digital identity and get a solid product put forward. And again, getting back to Digital Asset Authority, it all comes to the point where we need a vehicle for that. We need a provider, effectively, somebody at the state level that is capable of facilitating that digital identity's implementation. And then that can, again, further enable other aspects of what we're trying to accomplish, such as the tokenization of real world assets. So all part of the same conversation. And I think it's important that we keep it all on the radar at the same time, recognize that it's all interrelated. We've been working on each of these topics for a lot of years. Need to find a path forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay. Seeing none, we will continue to the consideration of our bill draft, 27 LSO 10. And so that looks like it's with you, Director Paulo. Talise?
I think Talise is going to walk us through it first.
Okay. Ms. Hanson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hanson, Legislative Attorney, LSO, presenting Bill Draft 27 LSO 10 version 0.6, Wyoming Digital Asset Authority. This bill draft was drafted at the request of the chairman and was discussed at 2 prior working group meetings. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to provide a high-level overview or a more in-depth review?
Let's go ahead and do an in-depth review. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, so walking through the bill draft, page 2 creates a new chapter 32 in Title 40. Pages 2 through 3 provides definitions, and pages 3 through 9 sets up the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority and outlines provisions for the board. The Wyoming Digital Asset Authority would be governed by a board composed of 4 members appointed by elected officials and 4 members who are subject matter experts in digital assets appointed by a majority vote of the 4 members appointed by the elected officials. The staff comment on page 5 highlights that the select committee may wish to consider the following. An even-numbered board membership may lead to deadlocked votes that may impair the authority's ability to act. Currently, the bill draft authorizes 4 out of the 5 elected officials to appoint a member to the authority, and the balance between the persons appointed by the elected officials and the subject matter experts. So the 4 members appointed by the elected officials are appointed with the advice and consent of the Senate. These members will serve 4-year terms, excluding the initial terms, where 2 members will serve a 2-year term and 2 members will serve a 4-year term. The 4 members appointed by the elected officials may be removed by the elected officials who appointed that member, and the appointing electing official may fill any vacancy. The bill draft would prohibit the elected officials from appointing themselves as members of the board. The 4 subject matter experts are appointed by a majority vote of the 4 members appointed by the elected officials. These subject matter experts do not serve terms and may be removed by a majority vote of the 4 members appointed by the elected officials. The 4 members appointed by the elected officials would also fill any vacancy of the subject matter expert member. Each member of the board is required to be free from conflict of interest in performing the duties of the board. The staff comment on page 7 highlights that the select committee may wish to consider who determines that each member of the board is free from conflict of interest in performing the duties of the board. Each member of the board is required to submit to fingerprinting unless the member of the board is a state employee or elected government official at the time of appointment. The members of the board must elect a chairman from the 4 members appointed by the elected officials, and the authority shall promulgate rules to prescribe the frequency of meetings of the board, establish quorum and voting requirements, and provide any other requirements for the governance of the board. Each member of the board shall, by virtue of the member's position on the board, simultaneously serve as a member of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. The bill draft outlines how members of the board are to be paid. And the authority is subject to the requirements of the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act, the Public Records Act, and the Public Meetings Act. So pages 10 through 18 outlines the powers and duties of the authority. The staff comment on page 10 highlights that the bill draft grants the authority a broad range of powers. The select committee may wish to consider whether the broad powers granted here are necessary to accomplish the intended purpose of the authority, and whether additional statutory limits, standards, or oversight mechanisms are necessary. Regarding the duties of the authority shall operate in a technological neutral manner, maintain a multi-chain operational capability, oversee the review and audit of the operations and transactions implemented, adopt rules as necessary to administer the chapter, serve as a central coordinating entity for the administrative coordination of blockchain and digital asset activities within the state, and annually report to the select committee on all actions taken under this chapter. The staff comments on page 12 highlight that the select committee may wish to consider whether further direction is necessary for the rulemaking authority, given the breadth of the underlying powers, and whether to specify minimum reporting requirements or require the authority to provide a report before publicly issuing any government-issued digital assets similar to the requirements for the Wyoming Stable Token Act. So the powers of the authority include issuing, maintaining, and managing government-issued digital assets, including asset-backed tokens and yield-generating tokens, establishing and maintaining comprehensive management procedures governing the issuance, management, custody, and disposition of government-issued digital assets, serving as the custodian of government-issued digital assets on behalf of a state agency, political subdivision, or instrumentality of the state, establishing, maintaining, and administrating digital asset accounts, developing, implementing, and maintaining cybersecurity policies, coordinating, collaborating, and entering into agreements with federal and state entities to promote the consistent, secure, and interoperable use of digital identities and digital identifiers within the state, employing a director and employees as it deems necessary, making and entering into contracts, agreements, or arrangements for services, utilizing the services of state agencies upon mutually agreeable terms and conditions, receiving by gift, grant, donation, or otherwise funds as permitted by law, entering into agreements with other states, acquiring by lease or by purchase personal property, and designing, developing, and implementing payment technologies and infrastructure necessary to facilitate the secure use of digital assets for transactions within the state. This bill draft would prohibit the authority from issuing or regulating Wyoming stable tokens. Only the Wyoming Stable Token Commission shall issue Wyoming stable tokens as provided by the Wyoming Stable Token Act. The staff comment on page 18 highlights that although the authority may not issue Wyoming stable tokens, The same board and staff simultaneously govern and operate both the authority and the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. Given the overlapping personnel and broad powers of the authority, the functional boundary between stable token activities and other digital asset activities may be unclear, particularly with respect to asset issuance, custody, and payment mechanisms. The Select Committee may wish to consider whether additional clarity is needed to maintain functional separation or whether to repeal the Wyoming Stable Token Commission and transition the Commission's powers into the authority. Pages 18 through 21 outline requirements for the custody of government-issued digital assets. The authority would be prohibited from acting as a custodian of government-issued digital assets on behalf of a state agency, political subdivision, or instrumentality of the state unless the parties enter into a written agreement. The custody of the assets must be held pursuant to a written custodial agreement with a bank recognized as a qualified custodian under state or federal law and who is providing custodial services. The bank must hold the government-issued digital assets for safekeeping and control on behalf of the authority. The staff comment on page 18 highlights that the Select Committee may wish to consider whether to address how fiduciary standards apply and how liability is allocated if losses occur. Pages 21 through 24 makes conforming amendments regarding fingerprinting and criminal history records, the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, and the Board of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission. The staff comment on page 23 highlights that the Select Committee may wish to consider whether assigning the same board members to both the authority and the commission risks blurring the legal distinction between the two. Pages 24 through 26 repeals obsolete provisions. Pages 26 through 29 provides that the terms of the 8 members of the boards of the Wyoming Stable Token Commission serving on June 29th, 2027 shall expire on June 30th, 2027. The bill draft outlines that not later than July 1st, 2027, the 4 elected officials shall each appoint 1 member to the board of the authority, subject to Senate confirmation, and these 4 members shall not exercise voting authority until confirmed. Upon the appointment and confirmation of the 4 members appointed by the elected officials, those members shall appoint the remaining 4 subject matter experts to the board. This bill draft would provide that of the general funds appropriated and reappropriated to the Wyoming Stable Token Commission under the 2026 budget bill, the 900 contractual series shall be retained by the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, and the 100 series, Personnel Services Series, Support Costs 200 Series, Enterprise Technology Services 400 Series, and the 6th authorized at-will employee contract position shall be transferred from the Wyoming Stable Token Commission to the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority. The staff comment on page 28 highlights that because contractual services funding is retained by the commission, the Select Committee may wish to consider whether additional funding is necessary for the authority to carry out its powers and duties. The commission and the authority are each required to submit a standard budget request for the next fiscal biennium. The bill draft provides that nothing in this act shall be construed to impair any existing contracts, agreements, or other obligations of the commission before the effective date. And the bill draft provides an effective date of July 1st, 2027, except for the section regarding the appointment of members to the board, which would be effective immediately. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jaleese. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Not a question, but my apologies for not giving a bit of an overview before Talise gave the detailed walkthrough. We did work on this during the last interim and had extensive discussion about the purpose of bringing this legislation and talked about bringing it during this interim. So here it is. But just for the public that are watching what we're doing here, the purpose of this legislation is to recognize that the Wyoming Stable Token Commission is going to need to go outside of the bounds of what is currently in statute because there's a much broader interest, I think, for the people of the state of Wyoming to get into digital identity, to get into other digital assets, and to work outside of that original mandate. So what this bill does, Mr. Chairman, is transition effectively the Stable Token Commission to a digital asset authority and broaden their purview to give them more responsibility, more rights and opportunities, and then change the makeup of the Stable Token Commission as the new digital asset authority the way that it's comprised so that it no longer requires the direct participation of the governor, the treasurer, and the auditor. I think each of our statewide electeds has done an amazing job implementing the stable token. And I think they'd also like the reprieve of not having to continue forever into the future. So part of the purpose here is to then provide some delegation there so that they have the opportunity to appoint their representatives and have those representatives carry on the broader mission as this moves forward. So I think it's just important to realize that context. There's a lot to go over here. We did work on this through a little working group. And one of the challenges I just want to bring the committee's attention to, which comes up a few times in the staff notes, is the idea that when we talked about how to implement this, we didn't want to break the Stable Token Commission or really effectively change it in any way, because the Stable Token Commission has entered into agreements. It has certain obligations. It oversees the stable token. And we didn't want to be changing something which is just coming off the ground, getting off the ground, and create risk, create uncertainty, where all of that uncertainty would just be coming from legislative changes. So the way this is constructed, it actually leaves the Stable Token Commission in existence with its current responsibilities, but it's subsumed by the Digital Asset Authority. So the Digital Asset Authority has responsibility for putting on a different hat and being the Stable Token Commission. That's similar to what we do right now with our State Land Board and SLIB, where they're sitting at this table, they leave one meeting, put on their different hat, go into the other meeting, nothing changes, the same staff is there, but they're under the statute, they're literally a different institution. So that was an intentional construction, but took a little bit of work. And so I think as we're working through this during this interim, we have to be thoughtful that it works correctly and actually implements that. We could have repealed the Stable Token Commission and inserted the Digital Asset Authority with all of those powers. That is definitely an alternative, and maybe that is a better way, but it's not how this is drafted. This is drafted so that the Stable Token Commission continues to exist, continues to have responsibility over what it's always had responsibility over. And I think that's an important delineation to raise. This is something, obviously, Mr. Chairman, and you and I have talked about this. We're not going to take any action on this today. This will be something we probably take action on at our third meeting. But getting this out there, getting it under review, having discussion about what we should or shouldn't incorporate, how it should be structured, and what's in the best interest to carry out our broader mission of incorporating, again, getting Frontier used statewide, allowing for more flexibility for our Stable Token Commission now as a digital asset authority, and building out these other features, like, for example, the digital identity that we discussed, where the Digital Asset Authority would have an opportunity then to facilitate a digital identity and operate and work on that either in conjunction with another agency of the state or on its own. So I just wanted to provide, Mr. Chairman, that broad overview. I should have started with that. My apologies for just jumping into Lisa's presentation, but that provides a little bit of context for those that might not have been paying attention during the last interim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you are forgiven for that. That
Thanks.
is okay. Do we have any other comments or questions? Senator Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just looking at the appointment process and then Senate confirmation. And so I guess I had a question for Talise. Are we aware of anywhere else in statute where Senate confirms appointments made by any of the statewide other than the governor? Because if you go look at 2812, 101 through 103, those strictly deal with governor appointments, which I believe also comes from the Constitution. We don't really talk about Senate confirmation of appointments made by other statewide. So just curious about that, and if that's going to maybe something we need to talk about as we work the bill draft.
Ms. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Craig Oat, no, I'm not aware of any other Senate appointment and confirmation from anyone else besides the governor. There is some language in the bill that kind of tried to mesh those two per the direction of the working group that they really wanted the Senate confirmation, but I couldn't find any other examples, but I could look further into that.
Mr. Chairman?
Just to Senator Crago, do you know of any thing that would say that it either is or isn't constitutional, it is or isn't appropriate? I don't know of anything.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Coma, Chairman, I'm not aware of anything. I just think we may get some questions from
Yeah.
the other three electeds about why they're having to go through Senate confirmation. Then there's probably, I mean, not necessarily they wouldn't have to. You could still do the governor's, maybe the governor's appointment becomes the chairman or something like that. I think there would be a way where the Senate would have some say over the committee, but just a thought.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thought. Yeah, Talise, can you dig into that for the next meeting, please? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll go ahead and pass the mic to Director Apollo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So because we had rescheduled this discussion, that gave us an opportunity to take the document that had been pushed public, the V0.6 draft, and share that with the commission. So at our meeting on June 16th, we did a bit of a walkthrough to get some of the feedback from our commissioners, some of whom ostensibly may be serving on the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority if it was to hold its structure. And let's say some of our subject matter advisors were to stick on. So I think at the highest level, the concerns that were shared map on well to what's already been discussed through the staff comments. And at the highest level, I'll refer to what I'll call the paradox here, the tensions at both ends. I think there's a lot of interest in keeping Wyoming on the vanguard of digital assets. We've been there for years, which is the reason why I personally moved here. And there's a lot of excitement about all of these different elements that could be brought forth, real world assets, digital identity, custody, in a more formal capacity like we have done with the stable token. I know we haven't scaled it to $1 billion yet, but there's really a lot of tailwinds for us, and there's a lot of respect and a lot of plaudits that we get for what we've done so far, and I think there's a lot of excitement to continue that. On the other side of it, there is a bit of a concern about the growth of government, which is a refrain I think we're always going to hear with these programs. If we start expanding out into real world assets, digital identity, that may require a different team with a different set of skills to bring that forward, beyond just the resources we have in the Stable Token Commission. If you look at someone like our Chief Risk Officer, she's someone who very specifically was a regulator of stablecoins when we brought her on. That's why we brought her on. If we were to get into the world of real world assets, we may need another resource with that level of specificity and background experience in that particular domain. So if you kind of multiply this out with, and again, understanding and recognizing that the bill is currently drafted would keep the same team with the Stable Token Commission as part of the Digital Asset Authority, I think what's alluded to on that last staff comment is there may be more funding and more personnel required to meet the mandates of what's being asked. I think another kind of implicit in that tension is segregation of duties. It's one thing we've had a little bit of difficulty with, nothing insurmountable, but if this was a larger organization, you could have multiple redundant levels of review and sign-offs, authorizations, and approvals. For us as a 5-person team, if there's, let's say, 3 technical resources and you have a multi-signature process, i.e. on a blockchain, you need multiple people to turn their keys at this, approximately the same time to do a transaction. There's a very finite number of resources available, and it's hard in some instances to create a robust approval process outside of just someone drafts, someone reviews and approves. So that again is another reason why you might want to have more people involved and bring some of these programs to fruition. But again, that's going to be more resources and more cost. In terms of the oversight mechanisms, similarly, there is some concern about, one body being its own judge, jury, and executioner. Some would say we've done that with the stable token, right? We've promulgated our own rules and we must abide by those rules. Perhaps that's something that, when we started this initiative, there was no Genius Act, right? There was no federal oversight of stablecoins. But if we were to get into the world of real world assets, there's pre-existing CFTC guidance and oversight there. So that may make things a bit more difficult. It may require, a regulatory body inside of the Wyoming Digital Asset Authority to oversee the branches that are actually bringing some of these programs forward. Again, just a thought there. But that's all. That's a number of the kind of flags that were raised as we did the review. And beyond that, I think a lot of it just maps on one-to-one with the staff comments. So I don't need to reiterate that. In terms of a couple of things that I think would be quite positive, and then this resounded with the commission, the interagency coordination, that would make a lot of the work that we had discussed a few minutes ago with this agency by agency assessment of who can use the stable token and how, that would make things a lot easier. I think we'd want to have a better understanding of where we're endeavoring to assist agencies versus where the authority would be able to compel agencies to take certain actions. We probably want to be, in personal opinion, but lighter touch on that. And then if my thought would be for interagency coordination, a lot of that would be brought forth on the custody side. If other agencies are using the Frontier token, not every agency may have a blockchain expert, or if you wanted to have, again, a multi-signature process, multiple redundant blockchain experts. So our agency, I would offer in its current incarnation with our current tech stack, can very easily do custody on behalf of other agencies. We use a platform called Fireblocks to do all of our wallet management. It is absolutely trivial to spin up new wallets on behalf of other parties. We would do the same thing when, let's say, engaging states for the issuance of their tokens. We could spin up, and we are spinning up digital wallets specifically for any kind of grant or donation that we take in. So that could all get very granular. And I think we are well equipped in our, again, current format to handle use cases like that. So one other thing we may want to think about is if this is something that's all going to happen at the same time, or whether there's a rollout where custody is a great place to start, and maybe a yield-bearing stable token because we already are looking into that. And then RWAs could be next to the sequence, or do we just draft something where everything's in here all at once and we just try to take it all on and see what works and what doesn't? One other point that I'll make, and then I'll pause for comments, is in terms of the structure in which the authority is kind of subsuming the commission, which kind of stands on its own, but is part of the whole package. I think there still is some back and forth to be had about the alternative model that Co-Chairman Rothfuss mentioned, where perhaps the current stable token commission does become the digital asset authority. And then there could be several divisions thereunder, where Division 01, where we are now, continues working on the stable token. Division 02, real world assets. Division 03, digital identity. Division 4, custody. That, again, this is my personal opinion, not speaking or relaying anything from the commission. That to me would probably map on easier to the state's funding process. We do have it in here that the Digital Asset Authority would be responsible for going through that biennial funding process and allocating those dollars by division would be a more granular and prescriptive way to bring that forward, lest it be at the behest of the agency staff and the director to essentially say, okay, well, we have X capital, we'll appropriate it in these different directions. That would certainly allow for more flexibility, but it may not have the level of control that the legislature want to see to get this thing through. So happy to stand for any questions, but wanted to relay that feedback from the conversation with the commission, as well as that own last personal point that I've made.
Thank you, Director. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none. Commissioner Pope? Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to add on a couple of comments from the commission side but I'm going to start out by saying I believe this legislation is necessary. I've said that before. I think, well, what I do is I look 5 years down the road and some of the challenges that we will be faced with and some of the questions that will be need to be answered over the next 5 years. And I think this creates a framework in which to address those. From the commission side, one of the largest concerns that I heard that I don't was touched on a little bit by Director Apollo, but I think I'd like to accentuate it is the fact that this in some ways creates a sort of mission creep. And we have a stable token right now that is extraordinarily well built due to Director Apollo and his team's work. It is masterfully mapped out. What happens if we take focus away from that mission and begin applying it to other missions? That's a lot of that can be addressed through the meter and timing of how we roll out the Digital Asset Authority and its duties. Director Apollo touched on that as far as what do we address first, second, third, and I don't know how we address that in legislation or if we even do, and then leave it up to the authority to figure that out. And then another one is the question I got was on the even number of directors and the potential for deadlock and all of that. And I think that also can be addressed pretty easily by, like making it so the chairman only votes if there is a tie, and that would only happen if one of the directors was missing. And internal rules within the organization itself can address those. But finally, it's just a matter of deciding the meter and timing of how this is rolled out. The two ways to do it have been talked about. We either expand the authority of the current commission and have it able to regulate all digital assets issued by the state, in which case it would require a major rewrite of the current legislation or for the current statute, or we create this overarching authority and have the commission as one division underneath that. So those are just some comments, some things we need to think about, but I'm going to reiterate the fact that if you're looking at a horizon of 3 to 5 years down the road, if we are able to do something now, and it will pay huge dividends in beyond that horizon.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, did you like to share something?
Sure. Well, Mr. Chairman, I did just want to kind of go and touch on a couple of questions with the commissioners. The first is just getting to the composition. First, I'll start off with just a note of the staff comment about 8 and the concern that Mr. Pope said about the number being 8. An even number board functions fine in a voting situation because you have to have an affirmative motion. That motion has to pass by a majority. That simply means a 5-3 vote. Senator Nethercott and I served for a lot of years in a Senate that had an even number. And we somehow managed to pass bills. It's just that it took 16. So it was a 16 vote majority, 15 votes to kill. There's no downside to that. So I don't know that that's a barrier in any way. And as this was being worked on by the working group, the 4 and 4 concept was you didn't necessarily want an imbalance where either group outweighed the other. You've got 4 that are technical, that have expertise, and you've got 4 that are political. And we talked about the idea of, well, which one should there be more of? And and we came up with neither of them should have more. And that's not to say that that's the right answer. I'll just say that that's the reason it is what it is as drafted, was the idea of you should have to get at least one person from policy and at least one person from technical for any motion to pass. And if you can't get there, don't pass the motion, find an emotion. That was the conversation that came up with that. But as far as the makeup with the membership, I'd ask Mr. Pope and Mr. Apollo about the electeds' feedback on us not having electeds anymore. And it was the belief when we were drafting this that that would be well received, that it was a member appointed by the governor, auditor, treasurer, and in this case, moving forward, the Secretary of State. So we bring in the Secretary of State's office. And that was based on the idea of digital identity and some of the other business concepts that we would see moving forward, having the Secretary of State's office engaged for the first time. How was that received? Does that seem like an appropriate approach? I'd look to Mr. Pope, who has his hand up.
Yeah, Commissioner Pope, you're jumping there.
I honestly heard, and Joel, I'll let him speak to it if he heard differently, but I did not hear any negative feedback about that. And we talked a little bit about the reasoning for having the Secretary of State, and Co-Chair Rothfuss explained that very clearly. The superintendent of public education, because they're a beneficiary of the stable token trust, that seemed appropriate there. And I think in our final iteration, was that position excluded? I can't remember now. Yeah, so that was excluded, but so we have the treasurer, the governor, the auditor, and the Secretary of State. And so I think that, there are big reasons for each representatives from each of those offices, but I did not hear any real criticism of not having the actual electeds. And maybe Commissioner Rebel can if he heard something, I'd love to hear what he heard.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pope, no, I'm similar. I've heard no negative.
Okay, and then Director Apollo, your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, same as our 2 commissioners, there was really no pushback on having our elected officials be doing the delegation. I think, generally speaking, the reason why we have 3 elected officials on the commission now is because we wanted this program as a world first initiative to have an incredible amount of oversight as the program rolled out. I think we've accomplished that. We've been maximally transparent. We've got our rules in place. We've got our policies in place. The token's live. And I think at this time, we can be a bit more arm's length, functioning as that authority, as a component unit of the state. There was really no pushback or really comment at all about the members being appointed by our elected officials. There was a question, I think Commissioner Pope referenced this a second ago, as to why the superintendent of education was not included. And again, just to reiterate, I do believe the thought there was because the school foundation program was the ultimate or is the ultimate recipient of the funds from the stable token program, we'd probably want that role to be a bit arm's length from potential direction of where funds can go in the future if this program becomes so successful that that program is significantly funded and maybe the legislature wants to determine funds may go elsewhere in the future. It'd be a great problem to have. But for now, the thought is perhaps that would avoid a conflict of interest with the ultimate recipient of the interest income by not including the superintendent of education in this mix.
Okay, thank you, Director. And before I get to you, Commissioner Pope, I heard some murmuring going on with my Senate colleagues, and I just want to make sure that we're good. No comment? No comment?
We can go back to Mr. Pope.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner Pope?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only other, or one of the only other real thoughts on this was the equivalent nature of the two boards or commissions. The directors on the authority are the same as the commissioners on the commission and in this legislation. And there was a real question about the dividing line there and the two different purposes and being able to segregate those things legally and in every other legally and operationally. And so that was a kind of a significant question, and I don't know how we answer that. I don't honestly have an opinion on whether it is necessary to have a different commission than you have a board. So I don't know if Commissioner Revel has thoughts on that, but that was the other significant issue that was brought up during our commission meeting.
Commissioner Revel?
I don't have a strong view on that topic. I do have a kind of separate issue, but I don't think this is the right time to delve into that. But I would love to come back as before we leave the stable token commission topic with one other thought.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Now's a great time.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is more of just planting a seed in it, and I don't know that there is necessarily an action item that comes out of this, but in my observation, and this is a conversation I've had with Director Apollo a couple of times, I feel that the work is transitioning a bit from development toward adoption. And I think we have a very capable commission and staff for kind of the development work that has taken place. And I say this with all due respect to my colleagues and mostly pointing at myself. I do think we're light on kind of the business development side. And I think that the commission would benefit from bringing on someone with more of a marketing business development background. I think the staff could also benefit from someone with those capabilities. And it's, again, just a seed that I want to plant for people to be thinking about.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the committee? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, one that I do think we need to explore more is whether we subsume the digital asset, or whether the Digital Asset Authority kind of subsumes the Stable Token Commission, whether they both continue to exist, or whether we kind of rewrite how this is done just a little bit and effectively eliminate the Stable Token Commission and give all of its powers to the Digital Asset Authority through this legislation. And while they may be equivalent, there might be reasons one way or another to do it the way it is or to change it the other way. And I've heard kind of a lot of ambivalence where nobody is quite sure of which direction we should go strongly. And I think that's fair. I think I'm right there with ambivalent. But I want to know if anyone sees any strong reasons. I really want a discussion on this one for why we should or shouldn't do it one way or the other. And I see Senator Craigo has some thoughts.
No, Mr. Chairman, you're looking for a tiebreaker. Is that correct?
Well, I'm looking for good discussion on this one because we need to do it for if we're going to rework the draft for next time. That would be one for us to really resolve on, and I feel like we should have our ducks in a row a bit better.
Senator Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess this is a response to the co-chairman's request. Sitting here looking at this sort of from a political perspective, I think we'd be better off to try to narrow it down to one entity. And maybe that's over time. I mean, maybe we phase that out over a couple years, but I just think it's going to be easier to sell with a lot of our colleagues if we say, A, we're changing the name, B, we're changing the job duties of the commission, but it's going to have a new name, rather than us having two entities going forward and everyone's going to ask us, why do we have two entities? Why do we have the additional expenses of two entities when we could just do it with one? From a technical standpoint or from a marketing standpoint or all the other things that go along with the commission, I don't have the answers to that. There are people who much smarter than me who are on the call and in this room that could answer that. But I'm just thinking of it from how do we get a bill draft passed? I think that's one thing we need to be thinking about when we take this to the floor next year.
Thank you, Senator Craigo. I agree. We might face some friction if we have two different authorities there. So, Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I don't think we should have two separate authorities. I think we should just make the transition quickly, take the momentum while we have it. I do think that an 8-commission board is too big, and I support reducing it. I know in Wyoming, we just have a hard enough time getting anybody to do anything, let alone something this difficult and requiring this level of expertise. I think it would be prudent to have more subject matter expertise, volunteers, less politicians. I think the idea of having the 4 statewide electeds try to find somebody randomly across the state who owes them a political favor is very, very poor planning. And we've seen that come to fruition in a number of our statewide boards, which there's a massive trend with all of those particular entities to remove the influence of those political appointees. And
Thinking more of a, let's just say we scrap it from the beginning, like scrap what we've got there and say, we want a 5-member board and here are some parameters for that board, and maybe they're all gubernatorial appointees or something along those lines. Or how do we get them at that point? Because most of our boards are political. They're appointees to begin with. It's just, it'll be one elected appointing everything is what we typically see. Although sometimes it does you have to have these types of people, these characteristics. So how would you see us building that board? Senator?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for the commission itself, which is a consideration of an application process where individuals submit an application. The reason being is if you look at it, this is not a nonprofit board. I absolutely understand. But with a corporate board or a nonprofit board of which there's familiarity with, you look at who your next board members are going to be based on your long-term planning or your strategic vision, and you try to attract that talent who's going to meet those needs for whatever challenges are facing the corporation at that time or moving forward. And so I wonder, because I believe that the authority should be comprised of only subject matter experts. And because that world, and I don't know that they should be limited to Wyoming either. I think there should be a majority with a strong connection to the state, but I think also being able to invite others globally to the potential table is a wise decision to actually get that substance of the subject matter expertise that we need. And so some type of application process of which you vet based on your understanding of the strategic mission of the organization. And then if you want some type of political approval because that makes us all feel better, the Senate can confirm them. But I think that that probably is a more effective way of actually holding the entity itself accountable for both its membership and its results, and sticking with its strategic vision instead of political whims or populism.
Yeah, confirmation from the elected body would validate really any candidate. Commissioner Pope.
Right now, I look at, in my industry, you have the board of CPAs, and there's an application process for that. And I think it would, the commission could conform to that pretty easily. And then with the legislative confirmation, I don't see any issues with that at all. One of the things that, as we move along, that kind of came across in my thinking as well, and I think I might have discussed this in one of the working group meetings, is that whatever we do, I think if we expand the powers of the current commission legislatively, as opposed to creating an umbrella organization, one of the things we probably need to do, if we are going to eliminate the commission itself as it stands, we need a body to oversee the stable token trust and oversee the waterfall feature of that, the income from that. So that's the only other, if we expand the commission, I believe that we need to have a separate body whose fiduciary responsibility is to that trust and to make sure it's being administered correctly. But as far as the application process, how we get to the 5 or 8 member, 5, 7, or 8 member board and who comprises that, that's, if it's all subject matter experts, I think I would love to see that. Who determines that fact? Are we in effect having a gubernatorial nomination regardless? Because an application is an application. I know the confirmation process will vet those, but rarely, if the political if the executive branch elected really wants a person in place, they're very probably going to get that person. So I don't know what again, I'm somewhat ambivalent on how we get there. All I know is we really do need that. Need this umbrella organization. And I think everything else is a legislative policy discussion.
Commissioner Revel.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I without sort of speaking to the legal or political ramifications, I thought I'd just add to the conversation from a sort of market perspective. My opinion anyway is if we were starting from scratch today, I would say authority with subject matter experts would probably be the stronger name from a market standpoint. An authority sounds like an institution that issues assets or manages infrastructure or participates in markets. Whereas a commission sounds more like the regulator. That said, I think it's good to keep in mind the trade-off. So the commission and having the elected officials does convey public governance and transparency and accountability, which I think we all felt was important as we were kind of launching into this. Taking the two in balance, I think the question is whether the priority is now kind of development and operational credibility, in which case my instinct would be authority with subject matter experts, or if we want to sort of maintain this governance and transparency with elected officials being kind of very bought into the process, then I think you kind of lean towards commission and keeping the structure as it is.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Senator Nethercott.
thank you. I just want to, I support what both Commissioner Pope and Revel said. To provide maybe more direction, as we have this conversation, I think there'll be some misspeak between authority and commission. I absolutely support the authority language as the commissioner has identified. And moving forward, I think I'd like to hear feedback from the committee about the removal of any political appointees. I think to Commissioner Pope's concern, there's a number of ways that we can do this. You know, I believe that the authority itself should welcome the applicants. In fact, I would ask you to identify what requirements there would be for someone to qualify to be considered and enter into the application process. And then you select, you know, one or two names that you could either give directly to the Senate, or if you wanted, you could give, if there's some comfort with the governor, of which I discourage that notion. And the reason for that is because of the, you know, we have a 50-page confirmation list of whom nobody really knows. So it is, you know, if you want to have that though, that's fine. If you don't, I think we could statutorily build that in. I don't know why that would be unconstitutional, particularly if we create it and say it's so. That probably will be just fine, but we'll hear from our legal counsel when they have an opportunity to review that by our next meeting. But I think that is the appropriate process. To provide that long arm transaction for who those members are on the authority is to maybe have that confirmation process from the Senate, just to make sure it's not some type of revolving door of friends, potentially. But I think that it's better for the authority itself, who has a vested interest in its credibility, to make those determinations as opposed to political people.
Now, personally, I agree. I think the Senate confirmation allows for that validation for the public, but also there's 51 pages then. So, Talise.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to point out that I did find, due to some of my LSO colleagues, that the Investment Funds Committee has 7 voting members, and all of those voting members are confirmed by the Senate, and the voting members are appointed by a selection panel, which takes in like interviews candidates to be on the Investment Funds Committee. So that is one current example where elected officials aren't appointing members to a committee that are confirmed by the Senate. I can dig more further into that, but that is at least one example of that is currently in existence.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
No, thank you for that. And I'm familiar with that from the Capital Finance and Investments Committee. To the IFC Commission, we have legislative liaisons, the chairs of the Capital Finance Committee that serve, you know, that attend the IFC meetings. Again, I hesitate to add on more layers to this. If a legislator wants to attend a meeting of the authority, they can, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way that it's going to be. But appointing more people and authorizing more unnecessary per diem, I'm not sure we want to go down that path. Just understanding how that's worked historically, I think it creates a lot more work for the authority to kind of manage all of these liaisons when they're actually substantively just not that helpful. And it's just something that we add to make ourselves feel good about, but doesn't add to the picture. So if there's somebody who wants to attend because they have a significant interest in the topic, you know, 93 of you can figure that out.
But that IFC process seems like a reasonable selection approach, right? Okay. And how do we select the selectors for that?
Talise? Representative Yin.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it is 5 members, 1 appointed by each member of the SLIB.
Commissioner Rebel?
I was just going to offer some thoughts there. I'm part of that. I'm the chair of the selection panel for the IFC. So if anyone would like to know how that process works or has worked or the shortcomings, I'm happy to share.
Mr. Chairman, let's ask him that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so it's meant as a double arm's length sort of appointment process. So as was just mentioned, each of the 5 elected SLIB members appoints someone to sit on this selection panel. We sort of liaise with the treasurer's office, that they just sort of help organize it, but the 5 of us operate quite independently in terms of our selection of who will sit on the IFC. There are terms associated to the IFC members, so we're often reviewing a renewal of a term. And then we were given some very light guidance in terms of what might be an ideal candidate for IFC. I think sort of the shortcomings are there really was no process prescribed, nor any specific qualifications prescribed, and so it's sort of left to the appointees to kind of come up with our own process and decide who we think are kind of the right people that we should appoint. In my opinion, that's a little too vague, and a bit more structure and guidance would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I guess the last question I'd have for Mr. Rebel is IFC is 7 members. We're contemplating the size. We have it at 8 right now. Senator Nethercott thinks that's too large. I do like smaller groups also. Is 7 the appropriate number, or 5? What are your thoughts, Commissioner?
And there are, as Senator Nethercott pointed out, I think there are ex officio members. I think the governor has a sort of permanent appointee. So I'm forgetting the exact construct of the committee now, that, there's probably some sensitivity towards oversight from the governor's office or oversight from the legislature that I would probably fail to appreciate in my response. So with that, I would just sort of lean back on what I think is a most effective size for any committee or board, which is probably 5 minimum and 9 maximum, with kind of 7 being a sweet spot.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I think that gives us good direction for how we can proceed with that. And we'll see if everyone agrees. We can talk about this after lunch when we get to our actual motions. We'll have public comment before that. After lunch, we'll have all our public comment. We'll see if there's any additional input, but I think that gives us good direction and certainly some things to chat about over lunch.
Yes, excellent. Some great ideas, some great conversation. We will have, we're going to go ahead and break for our scheduled lunch, and then we will continue with the conversation on Wyoming stable token and digital asset development with public comment, and then we will go to our committee directives. So go ahead and break for lunch. Thank you.